What happens when a wife discovers the truth about her marriage in the most unexpected way? It started with a simple dinner, a quiet evening, and a smile from Daniel. But when I overheard a conversation between him and his mother, Eleanor, I realized everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. He was plotting against me, planning my removal as easily as making dinner plans. But I wasn't going down without a fight. Stay tuned to find out how Emily takes control and gets the revenge she deserves. Don't forget to subscribe for more twists and turns in this dramatic story. I remember the day I met Daniel like it was yesterday. I was sitting in this small dive cafe, nursing the cheapest coffee they had, trying to make sense of the chaos in my mind and the mess of plans I had. That's when he walked in. It wasn't like a movie scene, no dramatic lights or slow-motion shots, just the soft chime of the doorbell and the stale scent of coffee mixed with his aftershave. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, pointing to the chair across from me, his smile dazzling enough to knock the wind out of anyone. "Looks free to me," I replied, keeping my cool, though my heart was racing. We started talking, and damn, it was like we were cut from the same cloth. We clicked instantly into all the same junk I loved, from binge-watching trashy shows to passionately arguing over the best pizza topping, pineapple. Obviously, fight me. Fast forward a bit, and we're dating, but not the casual kind of dating this felt real. It was like I had known him my whole life, and before long, we were talking about getting married. That's when the real drama began. His parents, oh boy. The first time I met them, it felt like walking into a lion's den in a meat dress. They had this unnerving smile while sizing me up, like they were deciding whether I was worthy of their time or not. "So, you're the girl Daniel can't stop talking about," his mom said, her tone dripping with something cold and calculating. "Guilty as charged," I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady, even though I could feel her gaze digging into me. And that's when they laid down the law. A prenup. Now, I'm not some gold digger, and I sure as hell don't need anyone's money, but that rubbed me the wrong way. "I'll sign your prenup," I told them, "but I've got one condition. If one of us cheats, the cheater pays up 100 grand. Daniel looked at me like I'd slapped him with a fish. "Babe, I'd never cheat on you," he said, eyes wide, serious as hell. "Yeah, well, my ex said the same thing before I caught him with his pants down. Literally. So it's this or nothing." He agreed, and his parents begrudgingly did too, though they looked like they'd swallowed lemons. We thought that was the end of it, but oh, we were wrong. One evening we were curled up together on the couch, a little tradition we'd started since moving in. It wasn't much a rickety old thing we'd promised to replace, but never did. Somehow it had become our spot. The TV was on, but we weren't really watching. We were too busy dreaming about a trip to Italy, one we knew we couldn't afford, but were dead set on making happen. "Daniel, think about it. Food, wine, art. We have to go," I said, my voice bubbling with excitement. Daniel laughed, pulling me closer. "Emily, babe, you had me at food, but let's be real. Our bank account's more camping in the backyard than romantic getaway to Venice." I nudged him playfully. "So we'll save, cut back on things we don't need, like your video games." He feigned horror. "Not the video games. Take my shirts, my shoes, even my beloved coffee maker, but leave the games alone." We laughed, and that was us always dreaming big, but firmly grounded in the reality of our modest lives. We didn't care. We were happy. The happiness wasn't just in the big moments, though. It was in the little things, too, like how Daniel would make breakfast on Saturdays. He couldn't cook to save his life, but he had somehow mastered the art of scrambled eggs and toast, served with a side of his god-awful coffee. I loved those mornings more than anything. "Hey, I'm thinking scrambled eggs today. What do you think?" he'd ask, already heading to the kitchen. "Only if you promise not to burn the toast this time," I'd call out, followed by, "And I'm making the coffee." One day, the topic we had been avoiding came up. We were doing dishes together, a mundane task that somehow felt special because we were doing it together. "Emily, we need to talk about, starting a family," Daniel said, breaking the comfortable silence. I paused, a plate in hand. "I know, it's scary, isn't it? What if we can't?" Daniel turned to me, drying his hands on a towel. "Then we'll deal with it together." "But we won't know until we try, right? I mean, how hard can it be?" I laughed, a mix of nerves and love. Famous last words, babe. But that's how it was with us. No matter what we were facing, we faced it together, even when his mom started dropping not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren every chance she got. Emily, darling, when are you going to give me some grandbabies? You're not getting any younger, you know, she'd say, her voice sweet but the message anything but. I'd bite my tongue, smile, and say, "We're working on it, aren't we, Daniel?" And he'd jump in, "Yeah, Mom, lay off, will you? These things take time." But as the year went on, the pressure started to build. Not just from his mom, but from within. We wanted a family, but it wasn't happening as easily as we had hoped. Ever since Eleanor found her new hobby of making my life a living hell, our home turned into a battleground, and the main weapon was her sharp tongue. It wasn't just about the occasional jib anymore. It was an all-out war with daily assaults on my self-esteem and role as a wife. It all spiraled one Sunday lunch, a day that was supposed to be laid back and peaceful. Eleanor, with her uncanny timing, dropped by uninvited just as we were about to sit down. The air was tense the moment she walked in, her eyes scanning the room like she was about to conduct a military inspection. "Well, isn't this quaint?" she started, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she looked at the modest spread I'd prepared. "You really outdid yourself, Emily. I can see you've been slaving away in the kitchen all morning." Her eyes briefly met mine, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Trying to keep the peace, I forced a smile. "It's nothing fancy, Eleanor, just something simple and quick. Please, have a seat." As we sat down, the barrage began in earnest. "You know, Emily," Eleanor said, loading her voice with condescension, "I was talking to Mrs. Mildred the other day, and she mentioned how her grandson was just born. It got me thinking, when are you and Daniel going to give me some good news? It's not like you're getting any younger." I felt my cheeks burn, a mix of embarrassment and anger. I glanced at Daniel, hoping for some support, but he was suddenly very interested in his plate. "Mom, come on," Daniel finally muttered, but it was half-hearted and we all knew it. Eleanor plowed on, relentless. "And Daniel, dear, I don't mean to be cruel, but you're not a charity. You work hard for your money. Why waste it on Emily if she can't do her basic duties as a wife? A cleaning service and a cook would be much more efficient, don't you think?" That's when I couldn't hold back any longer. "Eleanor, I am trying my best here. It's not like I don't want to have kids, and as for the house and my cooking, well, I didn't realize marriage was a service contract." Eleanor scoffed. "Well, it's not a free ride either. You have responsibilities, Emily, which you are clearly not fulfilling." The room was heavy with tension, and I could feel the tears pricking at the back of my eyes. But what hurt the most wasn't Eleanor's words. It was Daniel's silence. He finally spoke up, but it wasn't to defend me. "Yeah, Mom has a point. Maybe we should consider getting some help around here. Would make things easier for you, too." "Easier for me?" His words felt like a betrayal. It was clear I was on my own in this. Over the next few days, Eleanor's visits became more frequent, and with each visit, her criticism grew sharper. She'd walk through the house with an air of superiority, her eyes scanning every inch, pointing out every speck of dust, every pillow out of place. "You call this clean?" she'd scoff. "My eyes must be deceiving me because this looks like a pigsty." And then came the comments about my appearance. "Is that what you're wearing? A wife should dress to please her husband. No wonder Daniel is always so tired. He has to come home to this." I tried to fight back. "Eleanor, I don't dress for Daniel. I dress for myself, and he's always tired because he works hard, not because of what I wear." But it was like speaking to a wall. Eleanor had already made up her mind about me, and nothing I said would change that. The worst part was Daniel's silence. His lack of action was the biggest blow. Each night after his mother left, we fought. "Why won't you stand up for me, Daniel? She's walking all over us, and you're just letting her." "Emily, she's old, set in her ways. What do you want me to do, kick my own mom out?" "No," I snapped, "but I want you to be my husband. Stand by me, not her." It became clear that this wasn't just about Eleanor's disapproval. It was about us, about our marriage, and whether we were strong enough to stand together or let her criticisms tear us apart. As the days bled into weeks, I realized this wasn't just a phase. It was a full-on siege. If we didn't do something soon, there might not be anything left to save. Things between Daniel and I had become icy since Eleanor had ramped up her campaign of critique. But it wasn't just the home front that felt the strain. Daniel himself had started acting off, and it wasn't just a "he's stressed at work" kind of way. It was something else, something that made my stomach twist into knots. It began with the phone calls. Daniel had always been open about his phone. We didn't hide anything from each other. But soon he began stepping out of the room every time he got a call. The caller ID was always the same: Kevin, work. "Who's Kevin? Work?" I asked one evening, keeping my voice casual, but I could feel the tension rising. Daniel flinched, an obvious sign that he was on edge. "Oh, just a new guy at the office. Lots of questions, you know." But it didn't stop there. Daniel, who had never cared much for fashion, suddenly started paying attention to his appearance. Gone were the graphic tees and worn-out jeans. Now it was all crisp shirts, slacks, and cologne. He was wearing cologne now. Since when did he care about smelling like a department store? "What's with the new look, Daniel? Got a job interview or something?" I joked one morning, watching him comb his hair in a way I'd never seen before. He smirked, a little too quickly. "Just felt like changing things up. No harm in that, right?" Then the late nights started to become routine. "Another long one, babe?" I texted, trying not to sound too needy. "Sorry, Em. This project is killing me." "Won't be late, I promise," he'd reply. But the clock would tick well past midnight before I heard his keys in the door. I tried to shake the feeling that something was wrong, but it clung to me like a shadow. That's when I decided to hire a private detective. It felt like something out of a bad TV show, but I had to know. The evidence came in a plain brown envelope. The contents were as damning as they were heartbreaking. Photos of Daniel with another woman, moments of intimacy that left no room for doubt. But it was the recording that cut the deepest. Their conversations were filled with endearments and plans, and it was clear he was in love with her. And I had been living a lie. I sat there, the evidence spread out in front of me, a cold realization settling in. This was it. This was the proof that could anchor me in a stormy divorce should it come to that. Photos that caught moments stolen from our life together, and words that betrayed every "I love you" he had ever whispered in my ear. But I kept it all a secret, a painful burden I chose to carry alone. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. I needed a plan, a way to navigate the wreckage of our marriage with my dignity intact. The following days were a blur. Daniel continued his charade, and I played along, the perfect wife with a smile plastered on my face and a heart breaking silently. Our conversations became a dance around the truth, each word measured, every laugh forced. "Everything okay, Em? You've been quiet," Daniel would ask, his concern seemingly genuine. "Yeah, just tired, you know. Work's been crazy," I'd reply, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. It was just another mundane day, or so I thought, until I stumbled upon a conversation that would change everything. I was passing by the slightly ajar door to Daniel's office when their voices caught my attention. It was Daniel and his mother, Eleanor, and they weren't just chit-chatting. The tone was serious, heavy with intent. "I'm telling you, Mom, I can't do this anymore. It's not just about the kids. I've lost all feeling for Emily. It's like we're roommates, not husband and wife." Daniel's voice, strained and tired, floated through the gap. Eleanor's voice, ever so sharp, replied, "Well, of course you feel that way. She's not given you a child, and let's be honest, what else has she brought to this marriage? But let's not be hasty. My 70th birthday is coming up, and we wouldn't want to miss out on a generous gift from her now, would we?" The cynicism in her voice was like a knife twisting in my gut. They were plotting against me, using me until they deemed it convenient to throw me aside. "And after we get a nice, expensive gift, we can kick her to the curb, right?" Daniel said, his voice cold and calculating. "Exactly, dear. Just bide your time a little longer," Eleanor confirmed, her voice dripping with malice. I stood there, frozen, a storm of shock and fury churning inside me. They were planning my removal from this family as casually as picking out groceries. The hurt was deep, but it sparked something darker within me, a fierce thirst for revenge. They thought they could use me and toss me aside whenever it suited them? I'd show them I wasn't some pawn in their twisted little game. A few days later, during a family dinner that felt more like a charade than a meal, Eleanor casually brought up her upcoming birthday with that smug look I had come to despise. She leaned in, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "So, Emily, dear, what are you planning for my birthday? Something special, I hope." I met her gaze, my expression betraying nothing. "Actually, Eleanor, I was thinking of throwing you a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant, a night you won't forget." Her eyes flickered with greed, and she shared a quick, satisfied glance with Daniel. They thought they had me cornered, but little did they know I was already 2 steps ahead. "Oh, Emily, that sounds so delightful." "Just close family, you know. Keep it intimate," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Of course, Eleanor, it'll be our pleasure," I replied, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. The weeks leading up to Eleanor's 70th birthday felt like a slow march to the inevitable. Every smug smile from her, every dismissive shrug from Daniel only fueled my determination. My plan was simple, yet bold, just like the movies. Host a lavish dinner under the guise of a loving gesture, and then drop the bombshell. But like any good plot, the devil was in the details. The night before the party, the air in the house was thick with tension. Daniel, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit, lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Everything set for tomorrow?" he asked, his eyes glued to the screen. "Oh, you could say that," I replied, my tone masking the maelstrom inside me. The day of the party arrived, and the opulent dining room was slowly filled with guests, the air thick with anticipation. My heart raced not from nerves, but from the adrenaline of what was about to unfold. Eleanor, ever the queen bee, basked in the luxury of her surroundings. "Oh, Emily, you've outdone yourself. This place is exquisite," she exclaimed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. As we all settled in, the evening proceeded with the kind of forced cheer that only family gatherings can bring. There were laughs, stories, pleasantries exchanged. Then, as the dessert plates were cleared, the waiter arrived with the final act, the bill. He leaned in discreetly, his voice low as he revealed the total $33,000. Without missing a beat, I handed over my card, the gesture unnoticed by most. And then, just when I thought the night couldn't get any more suffocating, Daniel, with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, decided to drop his bombshell. "Emily, I think it's time everyone knew. I'm tired of this. Tired of us. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, suffocating everything else. Before I could even process the full weight of his statement, Eleanor's voice cut through, sharp and unforgiving. "Well then, since that's out in the open, I think it's best you leave, Emily. We're celebrating family tonight, and, well, you're no longer part of it." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Every eye was on me, waiting to see me break. But I didn't. With a calm I didn't feel, I stood, nodded, and walked out without a word. The cool night air hit me like a slap as I made my way home, the finality of everything that had happened crashing over me in waves. By the time I reached his apartment, a plan had formed. I packed my essentials, the numbness giving way to a cold resolve. This was it, the end of one life and the start of another. As I zipped the last suitcase, my phone started buzzing, a relentless, insistent vibration that I initially ignored. Curiosity, however, got the better of me. Eleanor's voice screeched from the other end. "Emily, the payment didn't go through. You need to fix this now." The sweet, sweet irony. In my preparations for the inevitable, I had secured my exit strategy. I had blocked the shared account, knowing it would be the first thing Daniel would try to use against me. "Oh, Eleanor, that's unfortunate. But since I'm no longer part of the family, as you so eloquently put it, I'm afraid you'll have to sort this out yourself." Her outrage was palpable, even through the phone, but it was music to my ears. The chaos that unfolded was a fitting end to the farce my marriage had become. Reports came through the grapevine of the restaurant staff demanding payment, of Eleanor's escalating tantrums, and eventually the arrival of the police to calm the storm she had become. In the end, it was Daniel and his relatives who had to pull together the money to settle the bill. a poetic justice for the betrayal and humiliation they had subjected me to. The morning after the dinner disaster felt like waking up to the aftermath of a storm. I had my plan, my resolve, and a set of divorce papers in my hand. As I made my way back to what used to be our shared home for the last time, the moment I stepped through the door, the air crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. Daniel and Eleanor were there, looking like they'd been arguing. The sight of me seemed to unite them in hostility.
"You've got some nerve showing up here after last night,"
Daniel spat out, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. Eleanor, ever the viper, was quick to add her poison. "Ungrateful wretch! You've embarrassed us in front of the whole city! Do you know how humiliating it was to have the police calm me down? People were laughing, filming!" I met their fury with a calm I didn't feel. "Embarrassed? You think that's your biggest problem right now?" I tossed the divorce papers on the table, the photos of Daniel's infidelity on top. "You should be more concerned with this." "No." The color drained from Daniel's face as he picked up the photos, his mother hovering behind him, her eyes wide. Their outrage quickly shifted to shock, then panic as they realized just how much I had on them. "And let's not forget the prenup, shall we?" I continued, my voice calm but unwavering. "You cheat, you pay. $100,000 to be exact?" Eleanor's face twisted, her lips curling into a snarl. "You wouldn't dare! You can't do this to us!" I met her gaze, cold and resolute. "Oh, but I can. And I will." The finality in my voice hung in the air as Daniel, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in, switched tactics. "Em, please. Let's talk about this. We can fix it." I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "Fix it? You think you can just undo everything with a few words?" "No, Daniel, it's done." Eleanor, always the manipulator, softened her tone, trying to twist the knife in a different direction. "Emily, darling, think about what you're doing. This will ruin us." "The ship has already sailed, Eleanor," I said, my voice unyielding.
"You should have thought about that before."
Their begging, their pleading, grew desperate, each word a futile attempt to salvage what they could. But my mind was made up. I was done being the victim, done with their lies and manipulations. In the end, Daniel had no choice but to borrow the money from his parents to pay me. As I left that house for the last time, check in hand, I felt the weight of years of deceit and guilt finally lift from my shoulders. With the payout from Daniel, I put a down payment on a small, cozy place of my own. It's funny, really, how much peace can be found within the walls of a place that's just yours. Every corner felt like a sanctuary, a world away from the chaos of the past. Life's quieter now, and I like it that way. I've got a job that keeps me occupied, friendly neighbors who nod and smile when I walk by, and a little garden that's all mine to care for. But every so often, the grapevine tosses a juicy tidbit my way about Daniel and Eleanor. Just the other day, I was grabbing coffee from the corner spot, the local hangout, when I ran into someone from the old neighborhood. After exchanging pleasantries, they leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Hey, have you heard the latest about your ex and his mom?" they asked, their eyes gleaming with the thrill of gossip. I raised an eyebrow, curiosity mixing with detachment. "Can't say that I have. Do tell." They grinned, clearly savoring the moment. "Well, word is, Eleanor's not too thrilled with Daniel's new girlfriend. They're at each other's throats, making your situation look like a walk in the park." The conversation moved on, but as I walked away, coffee in hand, I couldn't help but smile. There was a time when news like that would have sent me spiraling into a whirlwind of emotions. But now it was just another piece of someone else's drama. These days, my biggest concern is whether my tomatoes will ripen before the squirrels get to them, or if I'll ever stop looking like a newborn deer in yoga class. Life's simpler, quieter, and infinitely sweeter on this side of chaos. What do you do when you've been betrayed, manipulated, and discarded by the people you trusted most, your own family? When they thought they could play their games with you, using you until they no longer had any use for you? For years, Emily put up with Daniel's family, putting up with their subtle digs, their undermining comments, and their silent betrayal. She fought for her marriage, for her relationship, for a future together. But when Daniel and his mother plotted behind her back, planning her removal from their lives as if she was nothing more than an inconvenience, Emily's heart finally broke. In that moment, she made a choice that shocked everyone, including herself. She wasn't going to be their punching bag any longer. She wasn't going to play the victim. So, when the time came, she did what anyone in her shoes would do. She took control. She exposed their lies, and she made sure they felt the sting of their own manipulation. Now, Emily is free. No more lies, no more manipulative guilt trips, no more pretending. And as for Daniel and Eleanor, they got a taste of their own medicine, and it was sweet, sweet justice. So what do you think? Could you have done the same thing if you were in Emily's shoes? Would you have stood up for yourself like she did? Or would you have kept quiet, hoping things would get better? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
I never expected my life to change so dramatically on a sunny Sunday afternoon. The annual family barbecue at my parents' sprawling backyard was in full swing, the air filled with the aroma of grilled burgers and the chatter of relatives catching up. "Megan, sweetheart, can you come here for a moment?" Mom called from the patio, her voice carrying a hint of something I couldn't quite place. I made my way through the crowd, balancing a plate of potato salad in one hand and my daughter's juice box in the other. "What's up, Mom?" Dad stood next to her, his usual jovial expression replaced by an uncharacteristically serious one. "We need to talk to you about something important," he said, gesturing towards the empty chairs. As I sat down, I caught sight of Peter across the yard. My best friend since college, he gave me a curious look, sensing the tension even from a distance. "Honey," Mom began, her fingers nervously twisting the napkin in her lap, "your father and I have been thinking about the future of the business." I nodded, unsure where this was going. The family hardware store had been a fixture in our small town for 3 generations. Dad cleared his throat. "We've decided it's time to start planning for retirement, and we want you to take over the business." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. "What? Me?" I sputtered, nearly dropping my plate. "But I don't know anything about running a hardware store." "You're smart, Megan," Dad said firmly. "You've got a good head for numbers, and you know how to talk to people. We'll teach you everything else." I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. "But what about Uncle Jim? Or Cousin Mark? They've both worked at the store for years." Mom reached out and squeezed my hand. "We've thought long and hard about this, sweetie. You're the right choice. We trust you to carry on the family legacy." As if on cue, Peter appeared at my side, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his eyes darting between me and my parents. "Peter," Dad exclaimed, his face brightening. "Perfect timing. We were just telling Megan about our decision to make her the successor to the family business." Peter's eyebrows shot up. "Wow, that's big news," he said, giving me a supportive smile. "Congratulations, Meg." I forced a weak smile in return, my mind racing. How could I possibly run a business and be a single mom? What about my job at the library? And what would the rest of the family say? As if reading my thoughts, Mom leaned in. "We know it's a lot to take in, honey, but we believe in you, and we'll be here to help every step of the way." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Can I have some time to think about it?" Dad nodded. "Of course, but don't take too long. We'd like to start the transition soon." As they stood to rejoin the party, leaving me reeling from the news, I felt Peter's hand on my shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "want to take a walk?" Grateful for the escape, I nodded and followed him towards the old oak tree at the edge of the property. "So," Peter said as we walked, "future business mogul, huh?" I let out a shaky laugh. "God, Peter, what am I going to do? I can't run a business. I'm barely keeping it together as it is." He stopped and turned to face me, his expression serious. "Megan, listen to me. You're one of the most capable people I know. If anyone can do this, it's you." I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "But what about Emily? How can I be a good mom and run a business?" Peter's voice was gentle but firm. "The same way you've been an amazing mom while working at the library. You'll figure it out. And you won't be alone. I'll be here to help, whatever you need." As I looked into his eyes, I felt a flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with my newfound responsibilities. Before I could respond, a commotion from the patio caught our attention. "Oh no," I groaned, recognizing the raised voices. "Sounds like Uncle Jim just found out." Peter squeezed my hand. "Ready to face the music?" Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "As I'll ever be." Together, we headed back towards the house, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The hardware store loomed before me, its faded sign a stark reminder of the responsibility now resting on my shoulders. I took a deep breath, clutching my coffee cup like a lifeline as I pushed open the door. "Morning, Megan." Uncle Jim called from behind the counter, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The tension from the family barbecue still lingered, thick as the dust on the shelves. "Morning, Uncle Jim," I replied, forcing a cheerfulness I didn't feel. "Ready to show me the ropes?" he grunted, gesturing vaguely towards the back office. "Your father's waiting for you. Good luck." As I made my way through the aisles, doubt gnawed at my insides. What did I know about inventory management or profit margins? I was a librarian, for heaven's sake. Dad looked up as I entered, his face lighting up. "There's my girl. Ready to learn the family business?" I nodded weakly, sinking into the chair across from him. For the next few hours, he walked me through spreadsheets, supplier contracts, and employee schedules. My head spun with information overload. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Dad said, noticing my overwhelmed expression. "You'll get the hang of it in no time." Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Peter. "How's it going, future CEO? Lunch later?" I smiled, feeling a flutter of warmth. Peter's unwavering support had been my anchor these past few weeks. As I typed a quick reply, Dad cleared his throat. "So you and Peter seem to be getting pretty close," he said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. I felt my cheeks heat up. "We're just friends, Dad." He raised an eyebrow. "Uh-huh. Well, just remember mixing business and pleasure can be tricky, especially with his family's hotel empire." I frowned, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Dad leaned back in his chair. "I'm just saying, the Caldwells are big fish in a small pond. Peter's father has some aggressive business practices. I'd hate to see you get caught in the crossfire." Before I could respond, the office door burst open. Uncle Jim stood there, his face flushed. "We've got a problem. The Caldwell Hotel just placed a massive order with our biggest competitor. We're going to lose half our commercial accounts." My stomach dropped. I looked at Dad, expecting him to take charge, but he just nodded at me. "What do you think we should do, Megan?" Panic rose in my throat. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, being thrust into a situation I wasn't prepared for. But as I looked at the expectant faces of my father and uncle, I knew I had to step up. "Okay," taking a deep breath. "Let's call our supplier and see if we can negotiate better prices. Then we'll reach out to our commercial clients and offer them a loyalty discount." Uncle Jim nodded grudgingly. "Not bad, kid. I'll make the calls." As he left, Dad squeezed my shoulder. "See? You've got good instincts. You'll do just fine." I managed a weak smile, but inside my mind was racing. How could Peter's family do this to us? And what did it mean for my relationship with Peter? Later, as I sat across from Peter at our favorite diner, I couldn't shake the unease. He chatted animatedly about his day, but I barely heard him, lost in my own thoughts. "Meg?" "Earth to Megan," Peter said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You okay?" I blinked, focusing on his concerned expression. "Sorry, just a lot on my mind." "Peter, did you know about your father's deal with our competitor?" His face fell, guilt flashing in his eyes. I heard something about it. But Meg, you have to understand it's just business. My father—" "Just business?" I interrupted, anger flaring. "Peter, this could ruin my family's livelihood." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Megan, please, I'm caught in the middle here. My father's been pushing me to take on more responsibility at the hotel, but I don't want it to come between us." I stared at him, torn between my feelings for Peter and my loyalty to my family. "I don't know if it's that simple anymore," I said softly. As I looked into Peter's pleading eyes, I realized that taking over the family business wasn't just about learning spreadsheets and inventory. It was about navigating a complex web of relationships and loyalties. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that challenge. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down my dress for the 100th time. The thought of meeting Peter's parents made my stomach churn. After the fallout from the Caldwell Hotel's business move, I wasn't sure what to expect. "Mommy, you look pretty," Emily chirped from the doorway, her gap-toothed smile melting away some of my anxiety. I scooped her up, breathing in her comforting scent. "Thanks, sweetie. Now you be good for Grandma tonight, okay?" The doorbell rang, and my heart leaped into my throat. Peter stood there, looking dashing in a suit, a bouquet of flowers in his hand. "Meg, you look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm. "Ready to meet the parents?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The drive to the Caldwell mansion was tense, filled with Peter's nervous chatter about his family's quirks. As we pulled up to the sprawling estate, my jaw dropped. "Peter, this is intimidating," he squeezed my hand. "They're just people, Meg. I promise they don't bite." The front door swung open before we could knock, revealing a petite woman with Peter's kind eyes. "You must be Megan," she exclaimed, pulling me into an unexpected hug. "I'm Caroline. Come in, come in." Peter's father, Robert, was waiting in the living room. He stood as we entered, his imposing figure softened by a genuine smile. "Welcome, Megan. We've heard so much about you." As we settled in for drinks, I braced myself for interrogation or thinly veiled contempt. Instead, I found myself drawn into a warm conversation about my daughter, my work at the library, and my newfound role at the family hardware store. "It's not easy taking over a family business," Robert said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I remember when I first started at the hotel, scared out of my wits." I blinked, caught off guard by his candor. "Really? But you've been so successful," he chuckled. "Success doesn't come overnight, my dear. It takes hard work, determination, and a bit of luck." As the evening progressed, I found myself relaxing. Caroline regaled us with embarrassing stories from Peter's childhood, while Robert offered thoughtful advice on business management. During a lull in the conversation, I gathered my courage. "Mr. Caldwell, I have to ask about the deal with our competitor." Robert's expression turned serious. "Ah, yes, I owe you an apology, Megan. I didn't realize the impact it would have on your family's business. I've already spoken to my team about finding a way to make it right." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, that means a lot." As Peter and his father discussed some hotel business, Caroline drew me aside. "Megan, dear, I hope you know how happy we are that Peter's found you. You bring out the best in him." Warmth bloomed in my chest. "He does the same for me," I admitted softly. The evening ended on a high note, with promises of future family dinners and even offers of business advice. As Peter drove me home, I felt a mix of relief and confusion. "See? I told you they'd love you," Peter said, grinning. I nodded, lost in thought. "They're not what I expected. Your dad seems so different from how my father described him." Peter's smile faltered slightly. "Yeah, about that. Meg, there's something I need to tell you." We pulled up to my house, but I made no move to get out. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "My father, he's planning to retire soon, and he wants me to take over the hotel." My heart sank. "Oh, I see." "But that's not all," Peter continued, his voice urgent. "He wants to expand. He's talking about buying up smaller businesses in town, including—" "The hardware store," I finished, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Peter nodded miserably. "I tried to talk him out of it, but he's set on the idea. He thinks it's a smart business move." I stared at him, my mind reeling. The warm, humble couple I'd just met suddenly seemed like a facade. "And what do you think, Peter?" He hesitated, and in that moment, I saw our future hanging in the balance. His answer would determine everything: our relationship, my family's livelihood, the very fabric of our small town. "I think," he said slowly, "that we need to find a way to make this work for everyone. But Meg, I need you to trust me." As I looked into his pleading eyes, I realized that the real challenge was just beginning. Could I trust Peter to stand by me, or would his family's ambitions tear us apart? The days following Peter's revelation were a blur of sleepless nights and anxiety-filled mornings. I threw myself into work at the hardware store, desperately trying to find a way to make it thrive in the face of the Caldwell's expansion plans. One particularly exhausting afternoon, as I pored over inventory sheets, my phone buzzed. It was Caroline Caldwell. "Megan, dear," her warm voice came through the speaker. "Robert and I would love for you to join us for dinner tonight. There's something important we'd like to discuss." My stomach clenched. "Of course, I'd be happy to," I heard myself say, even as my mind raced with possibilities. As I pulled up to the Caldwell mansion that evening, Peter was waiting outside. His face was a mix of excitement and nervousness that did nothing to calm my frayed nerves. "Meg," he said, taking my hands. "Whatever happens in there, just know that I'm on your side, okay?" I nodded, not entirely sure I believed him. Inside, Robert and Caroline greeted us with warm smiles that seemed at odds with the tension I felt. We settled into the opulent dining room, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, as dessert was served, Robert cleared his throat. "Megan, we've been impressed with how you've handled taking over your family's business. It's not an easy task." "Thank you," I said cautiously, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Caroline leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. "Which is why we have a proposition for you. We'd like to offer you a position as co-manager of our new hotel expansion." I blinked. Sure, I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Robert nodded, looking pleased. "Instead of buying out smaller businesses, we've decided to focus on partnering with them. Your hardware store would be a key supplier for our new properties, and you'd have a seat at the table in managing the overall operation." My mind whirled. This was so far from what I'd expected that I didn't know how to respond. Peter squeezed my hand under the table. "It's a chance for us to work together, Meg, to build something amazing." I looked at the eager faces around me, feeling a mix of hope and trepidation. This is a lot to take in. What about my parents' store? I can't just abandon it. "Of course not," Caroline said quickly. "The store would remain yours, but with our backing and resources, you could expand it beyond your wildest dreams." As they laid out more details of their plan, I found myself getting caught up in the excitement. The possibilities seemed endless. New jobs for the town, a chance to modernize the store, a future with Peter that didn't involve choosing between him and my family. But as the evening wore on, a nagging doubt began to creep in. Was this too good to be true? What were the Caldwells really after? As Peter walked me to my car later that night, I couldn't shake my unease. "It all sounds wonderful," I said slowly, "but I can't help feeling like there's something I'm missing." Peter's face fell slightly. "Meg, I promise you, there's no hidden agenda here. My parents see your potential just like I do. They want to help, not take over." I wanted to believe him, but years of struggling as a single mom had taught me to be cautious. "I need some time to think about it," I said finally, "and to talk to my parents. This affects them too." Peter nodded, looking disappointed but understanding. As he leaned in to kiss me goodnight, I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with fear. This decision could change everything. My future, my family's legacy, my relationship with Peter. Driving home, my mind raced with possibilities and pitfalls. The Caldwells' offer was tempting, but was it worth the risk? Could I trust them and Peter with everything I held dear? As I pulled into my driveway, I saw my parents' car parked outside. They were waiting up, eager to hear about the dinner. In that moment, I realized the weight of the decision before me. It wasn't just about business or love. It was about loyalty, family, and the kind of person I wanted to be. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car ready to face whatever came next. One thing was certain. After tonight, nothing would ever be the same. The weeks following the Caldwells' proposal flew by in a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and late-night planning sessions. I found myself swept up in the excitement of it all, my initial doubts fading as I saw the potential for growth and success. Peter and I grew closer than ever, our shared vision for the future, bringing us together in ways I never imagined. One night, as we pored over blueprints for the new hotel expansion, he surprised me with a small velvet box. "Meg," he said, his eyes shining, "I can't imagine doing any of this without you. Will you marry me?" My heart soared as I said yes, the diamond sparkling on my finger, a symbol of all the promises we'd made. But even as we dove into wedding plans, the reality of our new business venture began to set in. The hardware store was busier than ever, supplying materials for the hotel renovations, and I found myself stretched thin trying to manage it all. One particularly hectic morning, as I juggled phone calls and inventory orders, my father walked in, his face grave. "Megan, we need to talk," he said, gesturing to the back office. My stomach dropped. "What's wrong, Dad?" He sighed heavily as we sat down. "I've been looking over the numbers for the store, and something doesn't add up. We're moving more inventory than ever, but our profits are down, way down." I frowned, pulling up the spreadsheets on my computer. As we pored over the figures, a sickening realization dawned on me. The discounts we'd been offering the Caldwell project were far too steep. We were barely breaking even on most orders. How could I have missed this? I whispered, horror washing over me. Dad squeezed my shoulder. You've had a lot on your plate, sweetheart, but we need to fix this and fast, or we'll be out of business within months. Just then my phone buzzed with a text from Peter. Emergency at the hotel site. Need you here ASAP. I looked at my father, torn between my responsibilities to the store and my commitment to the new venture. Go, he said softly. But Megan, be careful. Make sure you're not losing yourself in all of this. At the construction site, I found Peter in heated discussion with his father and a group of contractors. The tension in the air was palpable. Ah, Megan, there you are, Robert Caldwell boomed. We need your expertise. These gentlemen seem to think we need to cut corners on some of the materials to stay on budget. I told them we have a deal with your store for top-quality supplies at the best prices. I felt the blood drain from my face. How could I tell them that those best prices were driving my family's business into the ground? Peter caught my eye, his brow furrowed in concern. Meg, what do you think? In that moment, standing amidst the half-built walls of our future, I felt the weight of my decisions crushing down on me. The store that had been my family's legacy for generations was on the brink of failure because of my poor management. The grand plans I'd made with Peter and his family suddenly seemed like a house of cards, ready to topple at the slightest breeze. I need some time to look over the numbers, I managed to say, my voice shaking slightly. Can we reconvene tomorrow? Robert frowned, clearly displeased, but Peter quickly stepped in. Of course, we all want to make the best decision here. Let's take a day to review everything. As the group dispersed, Peter pulled me aside. What's going on, Meg? You look like you've seen a ghost. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. Peter, we need to talk about the store, about this project, about us. His face fell, sensing the gravity of my words. Okay, he said quietly. Let's go somewhere private. As we walked away from the bustling construction site, I knew I was at a crossroads. The choices I made in the next few hours would determine not just the fate of my family's business, but the course of my entire future. Could I find a way to save the store without jeopardizing my relationship with Peter and his family? Or was I about to lose everything I'd worked so hard to build? With each step, the weight of my engagement ring seemed to grow heavier, a reminder of all that was at stake. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake at 3 a.m. Peter's name flashed on the screen, sending a chill down my spine. Meg, it's Dad, Peter's voice cracked. He's had a heart attack. We're at the hospital. The next few hours passed in a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. By dawn, Robert Caldwell was stable but unconscious. The doctors spoke of a long recovery, and as I watched Caroline collapse into tears, I knew everything was about to change. Peter pulled me aside, his face haggard. Meg, I need to step in at the hotel. Dad's been running everything, and with the new expansion. I nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility suddenly thrust upon him. Of course. What can I do to help? Little did I know those words would come back to haunt me. Over the next few weeks, I watched Peter transform. The caring, supportive man I'd fallen in love with vanished, replaced by a stressed, short-tempered stranger. He threw himself into work, often staying at the hotel until the early hours of the morning. One evening, exhausted from juggling the hardware store and helping with the hotel, I arrived at Peter's office with dinner, hoping for a quiet moment together. Instead, I found him shouting at a group of employees, "I don't care if it's not in the budget. Make it happen, or find another job." The workers scurried out, leaving Peter and me alone. He turned, his eyes blazing. "What are you doing here?" I held up the takeout bag, suddenly feeling foolish. "I thought we could have dinner together. Maybe talk about the wedding plans." Peter scoffed. "Wedding plans? Meg, we're in the middle of a crisis here. The expansion is behind schedule, over budget, and you're worried about flower arrangements?" His words stung like a slap. "Peter, I'm trying to help, but I'm also trying to save my family's business. The discounts we're giving you—" "Oh, here we go again," he interrupted, rolling his eyes. Meg, it's business. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the greater good. The greater good? I echoed, incredulous. Peter, we're talking about my family's livelihood. He slammed his hand on the desk, making me jump. And we're talking about my family's legacy. Do you have any idea how much pressure I'm under? My father built this empire, and now it's all on me. I took a step back, suddenly seeing Peter in a new light. What happened to "we're in this together"? I asked quietly. His face softened for a moment, a flicker of the old Peter shining through. Meg, I'm sorry, I'm drowning here. I reached out to him, but he turned away, his attention caught by a ringing phone. I have to take this. We'll talk later, okay? But later never seemed to come. Days turned into weeks, and Peter grew more distant, more demanding. The hotel staff walked on eggshells around him, and I found myself constantly running interference, trying to smooth over his harsh words and unreasonable demands. One afternoon, as I was reviewing invoices in the hotel office, I overheard Peter in a heated conversation with his mother. "We can't keep operating like this, Peter." Caroline's voice was strained. "Your father would never—" "Well, Dad's not here, is he?" Peter snapped. "And if we don't turn this around, there won't be a hotel for him to come back to." "And what about Megan?" Caroline asked softly. "Have you thought about what this is doing to her, to your relationship?" There was a long pause before Peter replied, his voice cold. "Megan will understand. This is business, Mom. Nothing personal." I felt my world crumble around me. The man I loved, the future I dreamed of, it was all slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. As I stood there, frozen in shock, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. "Emergency at the store. Need you here now." In that moment, torn between the crumbling remains of my personal life and the family business I'd sworn to protect, I realized I was facing the biggest crisis of my life. Everything I cared about was at stake, and I had no idea how to save it all. With trembling hands, I gathered my things and slipped out of the hotel, Peter's harsh words still ringing in my ears. As I drove towards an uncertain future, I wondered if there was anything left of my dreams to salvage, or if it was time to cut my losses and start anew. The hardware store was in chaos when I arrived. Dad stood amidst a sea of paperwork, his face ashen. "Megan, we're in trouble. Big trouble." As we pored over the books, the full extent of our crisis became clear. The steep discounts we'd given the Caldwell Hotel had pushed us to the brink of bankruptcy. We had less than a month before we'd have to close our doors for good. "I'm so sorry, Dad," I whispered, guilt crushing me. "This is all my fault." He squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart. We always do." But as I drove back to the hotel, determination replaced my despair. I'd fix this mess, with or without Peter's help. The hotel lobby was a flurry of activity when I arrived. Sarah, the head of housekeeping, rushed up to me, her eyes wild. "Thank goodness you're here, Megan. Half the staff just quit, and we have a full house tonight." I took a deep breath, pushing my own problems aside. "Okay, let's get to work." For the next 12 hours, I was everywhere at once, checking in guests, making beds, soothing frayed nerves. By midnight, we'd managed to avert disaster, but I was exhausted. As I slumped against the front desk, Caroline appeared, concern etched on her face. "Megan, dear, you look terrible. Where's Peter?" I laughed bitterly. "Your guess is as good as mine. He hasn't answered his phone all day." Caroline's expression hardened. "This isn't like him. Something's wrong." Just then, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello? Is this Megan?" a woman's voice asked. "I'm calling from the Oasis Hotel. There's a gentleman here who's had too much to drink. He says he's your fiancé." My heart sank. "I'll be right there." I found Peter slumped at the bar of our biggest competitor, barely conscious. As I half-carried him to my car, he mumbled, "I'm sorry, Meg, I've ruined everything." Back at our hotel, I helped him to bed, my mind racing. How had we come to this? The next morning, I was back at the front desk when Peter stumbled down, looking worse for wear. "Meg, we need to talk." But before he could continue, a group of angry investors burst in, led by Robert Caldwell himself, looking frail but furious. "Where's my son?" Robert demanded. "What's he done to my hotel?" As accusations flew and tempers flared, I found myself stepping between Peter and the angry mob. "Everyone, please, let's discuss this calmly." For the next hour, I mediated a tense meeting, piecing together the extent of Peter's mismanagement. He'd made risky investments, alienated key partners, and nearly run the hotel into the ground. When the dust settled, Robert turned to me, his eyes shrewd. "Megan, you've shown remarkable leadership today. How would you like to take over as interim manager?" I blinked, stunned. "But what about Peter?" Robert's face hardened. "My son needs time to get his act together. The hotel needs someone competent at the helm." As the weight of the offer sank in, I realized this was my chance to save not just the hotel, but my family store as well. But could I do it? And at what cost to my relationship with Peter? I looked at Peter, hoping to see some sign of the man I'd fallen in love with, but his eyes were cold, resentful. "Go ahead, Meg, take it. You've always wanted to be in charge anyway." His words stung, but they also ignited a fire within me. "You know what? I will." Turning to Robert, I squared my shoulders. "I accept, on one condition. We renegotiate our contract with my family's hardware store. Fair prices that benefit both businesses." Robert nodded, impressed. "Done." As the room cleared out, I found myself alone with Peter. The air between us crackled with unspoken words and broken promises. "So this is it?" Peter said, his voice bitter. "You're taking everything from me?" I felt my heart breaking, but I stood my ground. "No, Peter, you did this to yourself." As he stormed out, I sank into a chair, the enormity of what lay ahead crashing down on me. I'd saved the hotel and my family's store, but at what cost? Could I really do this alone? Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. "Proud of you, kiddo. You've got this." Taking a deep breath, I stood up. It was time to get to work. The real test was just beginning. 6 months had passed since I took over as interim manager of the Caldwell Hotel. Every day had been a battle, but slowly, surely, we were turning things around. The staff rallied behind me, the guests were happy, and even Robert Caldwell had started to smile again. I hadn't heard from Peter in weeks. Part of me was relieved, while another part ached for closure. But I had no time for regrets. I had a hotel to run and a family business to save. It was a busy Friday afternoon when I saw him walk through the lobby doors. My heart stuttered. Peter looked good. Too good. Tanned, well-dressed, with a sparkle in his eye I hadn't seen in months, and on his arm was a young woman, her laughter tinkling across the marble floor. "Megan," Peter called out, his voice jovial, "just the person I wanted to see." I steeled myself, plastering on a professional smile. "Peter, welcome back. How can I help you?" He grinned, pulling the woman closer. "Megan, I'd like you to meet Sophia, my fiancée." The world tilted on its axis. "Fiancée?" I repeated, my voice sounding far away. Peter nodded, oblivious to my shock. "We met on my trip to the Bahamas. It was love at first sight. Anyway, we're here to plan our wedding. I want to host it here, at the hotel, for old time's sake." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "I see. And what does your father think about this?" Peter waved dismissively. "Oh, Dad will come around. Once he sees how happy I am, how successful I've become with my new business ventures, he'll understand why I needed to step away from the hotel." I nodded, had my mind racing. "Of course. Well, congratulations. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on something in the office. Sarah here will help you with your reservation." As I turned to leave, Peter caught my arm. "Oh, and Meg, I'll need those divorce papers signed ASAP for the wedding, you know?" I pulled away, my voice ice cold. "I'll have my lawyer contact you." In my office, I allowed myself a moment to break down. Tears of anger, hurt, and frustration flowed freely. But as I looked at the framed photo on my desk, my daughter, my parents, and me at the grand reopening of our hardware store, I felt a steely resolve settle over me. Taking a deep breath, I made a call. "Robert, it's Megan. We need to talk." An hour later, I walked back into the lobby, my head held high. Peter and Sophia were at the bar, champagne flutes in hand. "Peter," I called out, my voice steady. "A word, please?" He sauntered over, cocky grin in place. "What's up, Meg? Everything set for the wedding?" I smiled, sweet as poison. "Not quite. You see, there's been a change in management you should know about." Peter's grin faltered. "What do you mean?" "Well, your father and the board were so impressed with my work these past months, they've offered me the position of permanent general manager, with a significant ownership stake." The color drained from Peter's face. But that's my position, my birthright." I shook my head. "Not anymore." "Oh, and about that wedding? I'm afraid we're fully booked for the next year. You understand, don't you? It's just business after all. Nothing personal." As Peter sputtered and raged, I saw Sophia slip away, her eyes wide with realization. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You can't do this," Peter hissed. "I'll fight you. You'll what?" I interrupted. "Sue your own family's hotel? Go ahead. I'm sure the press will love that story." As security escorted a fuming Peter out, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I'd faced my greatest challenge and come out stronger. The hotel was thriving, my family's store was saved, and I had finally found my own path. Later that evening, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she asked, "Mommy, are you happy?" I smiled, realizing the truth in my answer. "Yes, sweetheart, I really am." As I closed her bedroom door, my phone buzzed with a message from Caroline. "Dinner tomorrow? We have some exciting expansion plans to discuss." I grinned, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The storm had passed, and I had not only weathered it, but emerged victorious. The future was bright, and this time, I was in control. Standing at the window, looking out at the twinkling lights of the city, I raised a silent toast to myself. To new beginnings, hard-won victories, and the sweet taste of well-deserved success. The best revenge, after all, is living well, and I intended to do just that. I stepped back, admiring the vibrant array of flowers I'd just planted. The secret garden, tucked away in a corner of Brad's family estate, was finally coming to life. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, casting a warm glow on the freshly turned soil. "Amy, where are you?" Brad's voice echoed across the grounds. I wiped my hands on my jeans and called back, "Over here, honey, in the garden." Brad appeared around the corner, his face breaking into a wide smile as he took in the scene. "Wow, you've been busy. It looks amazing." "Thanks," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "I think your mother will love it." Brad's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "I'm sure she will. Listen, I need to talk to you about something." I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach. "Is everything okay?" He ran a hand through his hair, a telltale sign he was stressed. "I just got a call from the office. They need me to fly out to Shanghai tomorrow for an important meeting." "Tomorrow," I echoed, my heart sinking. "But what about?" I know, he said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm sorry, Amy. I tried to get out of it, but this deal could make or break the company." I pulled back, searching his face. "How long will you be gone?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. He hesitated, then added, "I was thinking, maybe you could stay here with my mother while I'm away?" I froze. Emily and I had never quite clicked, despite my best efforts. The thought of spending weeks alone with her made my stomach churn. "I don't know, Brad. Maybe I could just stay at our place?" "Please, Amy," he pleaded. "Mom's been lonely since Dad passed, and I'd feel better knowing you're not alone, especially with the baby on the way." At the mention of the baby, my hand instinctively went to my still flat stomach. We'd only found out a week ago, and the news still felt surreal. "All right," I conceded. "I'll stay." Brad's face lit up. "Thank you, sweetheart. I promise it'll be fine. Mom will be thrilled to have you here." As if on cue, Emily's voice rang out from the house. "Bradley, are you out there?" "Speaking of Mom," Brad muttered. "We're in the garden, Mother," he called back. Emily appeared moments later, immaculately dressed as always. Her eyes swept over the garden, then landed on me, still covered in dirt. "Oh, Amy, dear, you look a fright. Why don't you go clean up? I need to speak with Bradley about his trip." I opened my mouth to protest, but Brad squeezed my hand. "Go on, honey. I'll fill Mom in on everything." Reluctantly, I headed towards the house. As I reached the door, I glanced back. Emily was gesturing animatedly, her voice low but intense. Brad's shoulders were hunched, his head bowed. A chill ran down my spine. Something told me the next few weeks were going to be far from fine. Inside, I washed my hands and splashed water on my face, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. When I looked up, Emily was standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "So," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "it seems we'll be roommates for a while." I forced a smile. "Looks that way." Emily's eyes narrowed. "I do hope you'll be able to keep up with the house while you're here. It's quite a bit larger than that little apartment you and Bradley insist on living in." "I'm sure I'll manage," I replied, gritting my teeth. "Oh, and Amy," Emily added as she turned to leave, "do try to dress more appropriately while you're here. We wouldn't want the neighbors to think we've hired new help." With that, she swept out of the room, leaving me stunned and fighting back tears. As I heard Brad's car start up outside, panic gripped me. What had I gotten myself into? The first week without Brad was even worse than I'd imagined. Emily's true colors emerged like a poisonous bloom, her words dripping with venom at every turn. I was in the kitchen, battling morning sickness while trying to prepare lunch, when Emily sauntered in. "Oh, Amy dear, you're not using the good china, are you? I'm not sure your delicate touch is quite up to handling such precious heirlooms." I gripped the counter, willing my stomach to settle. "I thought we could use them since your bridge club is coming over." Emily's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. "Darling, my friends are used to a certain standard. Perhaps it's best if you let me handle the entertaining. Why don't you go tend to that little patch of weeds you call a garden?" I bit my tongue, reminding myself that this was temporary. "Of course, Emily. Whatever you think is best." As I headed outside, I heard her mutter, "At least out there she can't embarrass us all." The garden became my sanctuary, the only place I could escape Emily's constant criticism. But even there, I wasn't safe for long. One afternoon, as I was pruning the roses, Emily's shrill voice cut through the air. "Amy, come here this instant!" I found her in the living room, face flushed with anger, holding a framed photo. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. My heart sank as I recognized the picture, Brad and me on our wedding day, beaming with joy. I'd placed it on the mantel that morning, hoping to add a personal touch to the cold, impersonal room. I thought it would be nice, too. "Nice?" Emily interrupted. "You thought it would be nice to plaster your common little face all over my home? This is the Hartley estate, not some trashy little apartment in the city." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. I'll take it down." Emily thrust the frame into my hands. "See that you do. And while you're at it, perhaps you could make yourself useful and dust in here. The maids have been slacking lately." As I turned to leave, she added, "Oh, and Amy, do try to watch your figure. I'd hate for Bradley to come home to find he's married a whale." That night, I sobbed into my pillow, one hand resting protectively over my stomach. I desperately wanted to call Brad, to beg him to come home, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. His business deal was too important, and I didn't want to be the needy, clingy wife Emily clearly thought I was. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices downstairs. Curious, I crept to the top of the stairs, listening. "Don't know what Bradley was thinking, marrying that girl," Emily was saying. "She's completely out of her depth here. No breeding, no class." "Now, Emily," a man's voice replied, "surely she can't be that bad. Bradley's always had good judgment." "Good judgment?" Emily scoffed. The boy was clearly thinking with something other than his brain. "Mark my words, George, she's after the Hartley fortune. Why else would a nobody like her set her sights on my son?" I stumbled back, feeling as if I'd been slapped. Is that really what Emily thought of me? What she was telling people about me? Suddenly, a wave of nausea hit me. I rushed to the bathroom, barely making it in time. As I knelt on the cold tile floor, tears streaming down my face, I made a decision. I couldn't let Emily's cruelty continue unchecked. For the sake of my baby and my own sanity, I had to fight back. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and opened the voice recorder app. From now on, I'd document every nasty comment, every veiled insult. Emily Hartley might think she held all the power, but I was done being a victim. "Let the games begin," I thought grimly. "You have no idea who you're messing with, Emily." I woke up to the sound of Emily's shrill voice echoing through the house. "Amy, where are you? These floors won't scrub themselves." Groaning, I rolled out of bed, my stomach churning with morning sickness. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night hunched over the toilet. But Emily didn't care about that. All she cared about was her precious estate. "Coming, Emily," I called weakly, fumbling for my phone. I hit record before heading downstairs. Emily stood in the foyer, arms crossed. "There you are. I hope you're not planning to laze about all day. We have guests coming this evening, and this place is a disgrace." I looked around the spotless room, confused. "I cleaned yesterday. What needs?" "Everything," Emily snapped. "The floors need scrubbing, the silver needs polishing, and for heaven's sake, do something about that rat's nest you call hair. You're representing the Hartley family now, though God knows why Bradley chose you." I bit my lip, fighting back tears. "I'll get started right away." See that you do, Emily said, turning on her heel. Oh, and Amy? Be a dear and run to the market. We're out of caviar, and you know how particular my friends are. I spent the next few hours scrubbing floors, polishing silver, and battling waves of nausea. By the time I finished, I was exhausted and starving. I hadn't had a chance to eat all day. As I was heading to the kitchen, Emily intercepted me. Where do you think you're going? I was just going to make a sandwich. Nonsense, Emily cut me off. You need to start on dinner. I've invited the Johnsons and the Petersons. I expect a 4-course meal, and none of that pedestrian fare you usually serve. My stomach growled loudly. Emily's eyes narrowed. Really, Amy, a lady never lets her base urges show. No wonder you've already gained so much weight. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. I haven't eaten all day, Emily. The baby. Oh, spare me, Emily rolled her eyes. When I was pregnant with Bradley, I hardly gained an ounce, but then I come from good stock. Now get to work, and do try not to ruin dinner with your morning sickness. It's so common. Hours later, I was plating the final course when the doorbell rang. Emily swept past me, pausing only to hiss, "Remember, you're the help tonight. Stay in the kitchen where you belong." I nodded mutely, too tired to argue. As I listened to Emily greeting her guests, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Brad. "Hey, sweetheart, how are things? Mom taking good care of you?" I stared at the screen, tears welling up. How could I tell him the truth, that his mother was slowly crushing my spirit, that I was afraid for our baby? Before I could respond, Emily's voice rang out. "Amy, where's that dessert?" Wiping my eyes, I grabbed the tray and headed to the dining room. As I entered, I overheard Emily speaking in a low voice. "Such a shame. Bradley could have done so much better. But what can you do when a gold digger sinks her claws in?" The tray slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor. Silence fell as all eyes turned to me. I'm so sorry," I stammered, dropping to my knees to clean up the mess. Emily's face was a mask of fake concern. "Oh, Amy dear, how clumsy of you. Perhaps you should lie down. You're looking rather unwell." As I fled the room, I heard Emily's saccharine voice. "Poor thing. She's just not cut out for this life, I'm afraid. Now who wants coffee?" Back in my room, I collapsed on the bed, sobs racking my body. I couldn't take much more of this. Something had to change. My hand drifted to my stomach, and suddenly a fierce determination washed over me. I might not be able to stand up for myself, but I would fight tooth and nail for my baby. Grabbing my phone, I hit play on the latest recording. Emily's cruel words filled the air, and I knew what I had to do. It was time to build my case. Emily Hartley was about to learn that this gold digger had teeth of her own. The day of Emily's grand luncheon arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. My morning sickness had been particularly brutal, but I knew Emily wouldn't accept that as an excuse. I'd barely finished setting the table when the doorbell chimed. "Amy," Emily's voice rang out. "Don't just stand there gawking. Answer the door." I smoothed down my dress, the nicest one I owned, though Emily had sniffed disapprovingly when she saw it, and opened the door. A group of impeccably dressed women swept past me, air-kissing Emily and exclaiming over the decor. "Ladies, you remember my son's wife, Amy," Emily said, her tone making it clear what she thought of that fact. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the scrutinizing gazes. One woman, however, looked at me with genuine warmth. She was older than the others, with kind eyes and an elegant demeanor. "Amy, dear," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Carol. It's lovely to meet you at last." Before I could respond, Emily cut in. "Amy, why don't you check on lunch? We wouldn't want anything to go wrong, would we?" I retreated to the kitchen, my cheeks burning. As I busied myself with the final preparations, I could hear snippets of conversation from the dining room. "Really, Emily, she seems like a lovely girl." "You don't know the half of it, Carol. The way she's changed Bradley." I gripped the counter, fighting back tears. Just then, the kitchen door swung open, and Carol entered. "Need a hand, dear?" she asked, her eyes taking in my distress. "Oh, no, I couldn't ask you to." "Nonsense," Carol said firmly. "I insist. Now what can I do?" As we worked side by side, Carol chatted easily about her garden, her grandchildren, anything but the tension-filled luncheon beyond the kitchen door. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself relaxing. "You know," Carol said casually, "I knew your parents years ago." I nearly dropped the platter I was holding. "You did," Carol nodded. "Lovely people. Your mother had quite the green thumb, if I recall correctly." Before I could ask more, Emily's voice cut through our conversation. Amy, where is that salad? Lunch was a minefield of backhanded compliments and thinly veiled insults, all delivered with Emily's saccharine smile. I focused on my plate, trying to keep my composure. Amy, one of the women simpered, Emily tells us you're expecting. How quaint. I opened my mouth to respond, but Emily jumped in. Yes, it was quite a surprise. We're all hoping the child takes after the Hartley side, of course. The table tittered with laughter, and I felt my face flame. Suddenly, Carol's voice cut through the chatter. I think it's wonderful, she said firmly. The world needs more children raised with love and kindness. I'm sure Amy and Bradley will be wonderful parents. A hush fell over the table. Emily's smile became brittle. Well, we can only hope. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself gravitating towards Carol. There was something about her, a quiet strength, a hint of sadness in her eyes that drew me in. But every time we started talking, Emily would swoop in, steering Carol away. Finally, as the guests were leaving, Carol managed to pull me aside. Amy, dear, I want you to have my number. If you ever need anything at all, please call me. I clutched the card she pressed into my hand, a lifeline in this sea of hostility. Thank you, Carol. Amy, Emily's sharp voice cut me off. Stop bothering, Carol, and come say goodbye to our guests. As I watched Carol drive away, I felt a mix of hope and confusion. Why had she been so kind? And why did I sense a hint of disappointment when she looked at me? Later that night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Brad. Great news. Closing the deal early. Be home in a week. I stared at the screen, a war of emotions raging inside me. Relief at Brad's imminent return battled with fear of what Emily might do in this final week. One thing was clear. I needed to make a decision. Would I continue to endure in silence? Or would I finally stand up to Emily? With a deep breath, I reached for my phone and pulled up Carol's number. It was time to take control of my own story. I woke up feeling dizzy and nauseous, my pregnancy symptoms hitting me full force. Despite my discomfort, I dragged myself out of bed, knowing Emily wouldn't tolerate any laziness. As I made my way downstairs, I overheard Emily on the phone. Yes, Carol, I'd love for you to stop by this afternoon. There's something I need to discuss with you. My heart raced. Carol was coming? I hadn't spoken to her since the luncheon, but her kindness had been a beacon of hope in this nightmare. Emily hung up and turned, her eyes narrowing when she saw me. Eavesdropping, Amy? How uncouth. Since you're up, make yourself useful and clean the conservatory. It's filthy. I bit back a retort and headed to the conservatory. Hours passed as I scrubbed and polished, my back aching and stomach churning. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I sank onto a chaise lounge, closing my eyes for just a moment. Amy? I jolted awake to find Emily looming over me, her face twisted with rage. You lazy, good-for-nothing girl. I give you one simple task, and I find you napping like some pampered princess. I'm sorry, Emily, I stammered, struggling to my feet. I just felt a bit faint. Faint? Emily scoffed. In my day, women didn't use pregnancy as an excuse to shirk their duties. But then, I suppose I shouldn't expect better from someone of your background. Tears stung my eyes as Emily continued her tirade. I knew from the moment Bradley brought you home that you were nothing but a gold digger. What did you do? Get yourself pregnant to trap him? Well, let me tell you something. You little. Emily. We both whirled to see Carol standing in the doorway, her face pale with shock. Emily's demeanor changed instantly. Carol, darling, I didn't hear you come in. Amy and I were just having a little chat about her responsibilities. Carol's eyes flicked between us, settling on me with concern. Amy, dear, you look unwell. Why don't you sit down? Before I could move, Emily interjected. Nonsense, she's fine. Amy, go make some tea for our guest. As I turned to leave, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I stumbled, my vision blurring. Amy? Carol's voice seemed far away. I felt hands catching me as I fell, then everything went black. I came to on the chaise lounge, Carol's worried face hovering above me. There you are, dear. How are you feeling? I'm okay, I mumbled, trying to sit up. Emily's voice cut through the fog. Really, Amy, such dramatics. I'm sure Carol didn't come here to witness your theatrics. Carol's eyes flashed. Actually, Emily, I think it's time we had a frank discussion about how you're treating your daughter-in-law. Emily's face paled. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Amy is simply... I heard you, Emily, Carol said firmly. Every word, and I'm appalled. As the two women faced off, I felt a surge of strength. This was my chance. "Emily," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I've been documenting everything. The insults, the unreasonable demands, all of it. If you don't change your behavior, I'll have no choice but to show Brad the truth when he returns." Emily's jaw dropped. "You wouldn't dare." "I would," I replied, meeting her gaze. "This isn't just about me anymore. I have to protect my child from your toxicity." A tense silence fell. Then, to my shock, Emily burst into tears. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "Bradley is all I have left. I can't lose him." As Carol comforted the suddenly vulnerable Emily, I sat back, stunned. Was this genuine emotion or another manipulation? Looking at Carol's sympathetic face, I realized I had a decision to make. Did I use this moment of weakness to strike back at Emily, or was there a chance for reconciliation? My hand drifted to my stomach, and I knew what I had to do. For the sake of my child, I needed to break this cycle of hurt. But how? With a deep breath, I stood up. It was time to take control of this situation, once and for all. The tension in the room was palpable as Emily's sobs subsided into hiccups. Carol patted her back gently, but her eyes were fixed on me, a mixture of sympathy and determination in her gaze. "Amy," Carol said softly, "there's something you need to know." I braced myself, unsure of what was coming next. Carol took a deep breath. "I knew your parents, as I mentioned before, but it wasn't just a casual acquaintance. Your mother? She was my best friend." The room seemed to tilt. "What? But how? Why didn't you say anything before?" "I wanted to, believe me," Carol replied, her eyes misting, "but I made a promise years ago to your mother. She asked me to watch over you, but to let you make your own way in the world." Emily's head snapped up, her tear-stained face twisted with confusion. "What are you talking about, Carol?" Carol squared her shoulders. "Emily, it's time for the truth to come out. Amy isn't some gold digger you can bully and demean. Her parents were respected members of this community before they passed. In fact, Amy's mother saved your husband's life once. I felt like I was in a dream." "What? How?" "Your mother was a brilliant botanist," Carol explained. "When Emily's husband fell ill with a rare condition, it was your mother who developed the treatment that saved him. But she never wanted recognition. She only cared about helping people." Emily's face had gone pale. That's impossible. I would have known." "Would you?" Carol asked sharply. "Or were you too caught up in your own world to notice the kindness of others?" I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. All this time, I'd been enduring Emily's abuse, thinking I had no connection to this world. But my parents had been a part of it all along. Suddenly, Emily lunged for her phone. "I need to call Bradley. This can't be true. He needs to come home now." Without thinking, I grabbed Emily's wrist. "No! You don't get to control this narrative anymore." Emily's eyes widened in shock at my defiance. "How dare you?" "No, how dare you?" I shot back, my voice trembling with anger and newfound strength. "You've tormented me for weeks, made me feel worthless and small, but I'm done being your punching bag." I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the voice memo app. "I have everything recorded, Emily. Every insult, every cruel comment. Do you really want Brad to hear how you've treated his wife and unborn child?" Emily's face crumpled. "You wouldn't." "I don't want to," I said, softening my tone. "But I will if I have to. This has to stop, Emily. Not just for me, but for all of us, including you." Carol stepped between us. "Ladies, please, this isn't the way to resolve things. Emily, you need to understand the pain you've caused. And Amy, revenge won't heal those wounds." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "You're right, Carol. But what do we do now?" Before anyone could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Brad. "Hey, sweetheart. Surprise. I'm at the airport. Be home in an hour. Can't wait to see you and Mom." The blood drained from my face. Brad was coming home. Now. And he had no idea about the war that had been raging in his absence. Emily and I locked eyes, a moment of understanding passing between us. We had less than an hour to decide how this story would end. "Well," Carol said, her voice steady, "it seems we have a choice to make. Do we continue this cycle of hurt, or do we find a way to heal?" I looked down at my phone, then at Emily's tear-stained face, and finally at my still flat stomach where my child was growing. In that moment, I realized that the next move I made would shape not just my future, but the future of my family for generations to come. With a deep breath, I made my decision. Let's talk. The sound of Brad's key in the lock sent my heart racing. Emily, Carol, and I exchanged panicked glances. We'd spent the last hour in tense discussion, but nothing was resolved. Hello? Anyone home? Brad's cheerful voice echoed through the foyer. Emily straightened her hair, plastering on a smile. In here, darling. Brad appeared in the doorway, his face lighting up when he saw me. Amy, God, I've missed you. He swept me into a hug, then froze, noticing the tension in the room. What's going on? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How could I possibly explain everything? Emily jumped in. Bradley, dear, we were just having a little chat, nothing to worry about. Brad's eyes narrowed. Mom, what have you done? The accusation in his voice surprised me. Maybe he wasn't as oblivious as I'd thought. I haven't done anything, Emily protested, but her voice wavered. Actually, Emily, Carol interjected gently, I think it's time for honesty. Brad looked between us, confusion etched on his face. Will someone please tell me what's happening? I took a deep breath. It was now or never. Brad, your mother has been unkind to me while you were gone. Unkind? Emily scoffed. Don't be so dramatic, Amy. Something inside me snapped. Dramatic, you've belittled me, insulted my family, worked me to exhaustion despite my pregnancy, and made me feel worthless in my own home. Brad's face darkened. Mom, is this true? Emily's mask crumbled. I was just trying to protect you, Bradley. She's not good enough for you. Not good enough? Carol's voice rang out. Emily, do you even know who Amy is, who her parents were? As Carol revealed the truth about my parents, Brad's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally deep hurt. You knew? He asked his mother. You knew about Amy's parents and still treated her this way? Emily's shoulders sagged. I didn't want to lose you, Bradley. You're all I have left. So you tried to drive away the woman I love, the mother of my child? Brad's voice cracked with emotion. I felt a surge of love for him, mixed with a fierce determination. Brad, there's more. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the recordings. I've documented everything. Emily's eyes widened in panic. Amy, please? For a moment I was tempted. One button, and Emily would face the consequences of her actions. But as I looked at Brad's anguished face, I realized the truth would hurt him as much as it would punish Emily. With a shaky breath, I deleted the recordings. No more secrets, no more manipulation. If we're going to be a family, we need to start fresh. Brad squeezed my hand, gratitude shining in his eyes. Amy's right, Mom, I love you, but this has to stop. You need to accept Amy, or what? Emily whispered. Or you'll lose us both, Brad said firmly. The room fell silent. Emily's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me. As I watched Emily break down, I felt my anger begin to dissipate. In its place, a surprising emotion emerged, compassion. This woman, who had tormented me for weeks, was suddenly human, flawed, afraid, and desperately lonely. I knelt beside Emily, taking her hand. We're not leaving you, Emily, but things have to change. Emily nodded, squeezing my hand. I'll do better, I promise. As Brad joined us, wrapping us both in a hug, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, we could build a real family. Carol watched us with tears in her eyes. Your parents would be so proud of you, Amy. She whispered. In that moment, surrounded by the tangled threads of past and present, I realized that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Messy, complicated, but full of possibility. The real challenge was just starting. Could we truly heal the wounds of the past and create a future together? As I felt my baby kick for the first time, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to try. 6 months had passed since that fateful confrontation, and I found myself back in the secret garden, my swollen belly a testament to the new life growing within me. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the tension that had permeated the house for so long. Amy? Emily's voice called out, hesitant and soft, so different from the sharp tones that had once cut me to the core. I turned to see her approaching, a tray of lemonade in her hands. I thought you might be thirsty, she said, offering me a glass. As I took it, our eyes met. The past months hadn't been easy. There had been arguments, tears, and moments when I thought we'd never move past the hurt, but slowly, painfully, we'd begun to rebuild. Thank you, I said, meaning it for more than just the drink. Emily settled beside me on the bench, her eyes roaming over the garden. You've done wonders here, she murmured, just like your mother would have. The mention of my mother no longer brought pain, but a warm glow of pride. Carol had shared so many stories, helping me piece together the legacy I'd inherited. Suddenly, a sharp pain lanced through my abdomen. I gasped, the glass slipping from my fingers. Emily's eyes widened in alarm. "Amy, is it time?" I nodded, unable to speak as another contraction hit. Emily sprang into action, her voice strong and sure as she called for Brad and dialed the hospital. The next few hours passed in a blur of pain and anticipation. Brad held my hand, his face a mix of worry and excitement, and to my surprise, Emily never left my side, her cool hand on my forehead a constant comfort. As dawn broke, a new cry filled the room. Our daughter Lily entered the world with a lusty wail that brought tears to my eyes. "She's beautiful," Brad whispered, cradling our tiny daughter. I looked up to see Emily hovering uncertainly at the edge of the bed. "Would you like to hold your granddaughter?" I asked. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she gently took Lily in her arms. "Hello, little one," she cooed. "I'm your Grammy, and I promise to love you fiercely and fairly, always." In that moment, watching Emily with Lily, I felt the last of my resentment melt away. We'd all made mistakes, but we'd also found the strength to forgive and grow. As if sensing the shift, Lily opened her eyes, fixing us all with a gaze that seemed wise beyond her minutes. "She has your mother's eyes," Emily said softly, looking at me with a mixture of regret and hope. I reached out, taking Emily's hand. "And she'll grow up knowing all about her grandmother and her great-grandparents and the legacy of love and strength they left behind." Brad joined us on the bed, wrapping his arms around us all. "We're a family," he said firmly. "All of us. And we're going to do this right." As I looked at the faces around me, Brad's steadfast love, Emily's hard-won acceptance, and Lily's infinite potential, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been difficult, filled with thorns and poison ivy, but it had led us here, to this moment of new blooms and fresh starts. Carol arrived later that day, her arms full of blue hydrangeas. "For new beginnings," she said with a wink. As we all gathered around Lily, sharing stories and laughter, I realized that this was more than just a happy ending. It was a new chapter, one filled with the promise of growth, understanding, and unconditional love. I thought of the secret garden, how it had flourished under care and attention, despite the initial neglect. Our family was like that garden now, tended with patience, nurtured with compassion, and blooming with the vibrant colors of reconciliation and hope. Lily gurgled in my arms, her tiny hand wrapping around my finger. In her grasp, I felt the strength of generations, my parents' legacy, Brad's unwavering support, Emily's hard-earned wisdom, and my own resilience. As I looked out the window at the garden beyond, I smiled. Life, like a garden, was full of seasons. We'd weathered the winter of discontent and emerged into a spring of new possibilities, and I knew, with unshakable certainty, that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, our roots intertwined, reaching for the sun. I slammed the door of my office, the vibration rattling the framed blueprints on the wall. Another day, another argument with a client who thought they knew better than a professional architect with 15 years of experience. I sank into my chair, rubbing my temples. A soft knock interrupted my brooding. "Rose? Everything all right in there?" I sighed. "Come in, Leonard." The door creaked open, and Leonard's salt and pepper head poked through. "Brought you some coffee. Figured you might need it after that spirited discussion." I couldn't help but smile. Leonard had been my mentor when I first started at the firm, and now, even as colleagues, he still looked out for me. "Thanks, Leonard. You're a lifesaver." He set the mug on my desk, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Same old story. Client thinks because they watched a few home renovation shows, they're suddenly experts in structural engineering." Leonard chuckled. "Ah, the joys of our profession. You handled it well, though. I was impressed." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because I feel like I just got run over by a dump truck full of unrealistic expectations." He leaned against my desk, his voice softening. "Rose, you're one of the best architects I've ever worked with. Don't let one difficult client shake your confidence." I felt a warmth spread through my chest at his words. Leonard always knew just what to say. Sometimes I wondered if the moment was broken by my phone buzzing. I glanced at the screen, expecting another work email. Instead, I saw an unfamiliar number. "Everything okay?" Leonard asked, noticing my frown. "Yeah, just a weird text." I showed him the message. "The truth about your parents will shock you. Meet me at Riverside Park, 7 p.m. tonight if you want answers." Leonard's brow furrowed. "That's concerning. Are you going to go?" I bit my lip, conflicted. "I don't know. It's probably just some prank or scam, right?" "Probably," Leonard agreed, but he didn't sound convinced. "Still, maybe you should bring someone with you just in case." I shook my head. "No, I need to handle this myself." The truth was, my relationship with my parents had always been complicated. If there really was some hidden truth, I needed to face it alone. Leonard looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just squeezed my shoulder. "All right, but promise me you'll be careful. And call me if you need anything, okay?" I nodded, grateful for his concern. As he left my office, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change dramatically. The rest of the day crawled by in a haze of meetings and phone calls. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, my stomach was in knots. I found myself standing at the edge of Riverside Park, scanning the faces of passers-by, wondering which one held the key to my past. Rose Thompson? I spun around to see a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a folder tucked under her arm. "Yes, that's me," I said cautiously. She thrust the folder at me. "Everything you need to know is in here. I'm sorry, but your parents aren't who you think they are." Before I could respond, she turned and disappeared into the evening crowd, leaving me clutching a folder that suddenly felt as heavy as my racing heart. With trembling hands, I opened it and began to read. The first words made my blood run cold. DNA test results. No genetic match found between Rose Thompson and her presumed parents. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Who was I? And more importantly, who were the people I had called Mom and Dad for the past 35 years? The revelation about my parents hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me adrift in a sea of confusion and betrayal. For days, I wandered through life in a daze, barely able to focus on work. Leonard kept shooting me concerned glances, but I couldn't bring myself to share the truth. How could I, when I barely understood it myself? It was in this fragile state that my friend Megan dragged me to a charity event for urban development. "You need to get out, Rose," she insisted. "Meet some new people, maybe even a handsome stranger." I rolled my eyes but allowed her to pull me along. As we entered the crowded ballroom, I felt overwhelmed by the sea of unfamiliar faces. That's when I quite literally bumped into him. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, mortified as I watched my champagne splash onto his crisp white shirt. He laughed, a warm, rich sound that made me look up. "No worries. I was looking for an excuse to ditch this monkey suit anyway." His easy smile and twinkling blue eyes caught me off guard. "I'm Jake," he said, extending his hand. "Urban planner and occasional champagne magnate." Despite myself, I felt a smile tugging at my lips. Rose, architect and accidental drink thrower. We fell into easy conversation, discussing our shared passion for sustainable city design. For the first time in days, I felt the weight on my chest lighten. "So, Rose," Jake said, leaning in conspiratorially, "what do you say we ditch this stuffy party and grab a real drink? I know a great little place around the corner." I hesitated, glancing at Megan, who was giving me an emphatic thumbs up from across the room. You know what? Why not? The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Jake and I saw each other almost every day, our connection deepening with each shared laugh and passionate debate about urban planning. He was kind, intelligent, and seemed to genuinely care about me. One Sunday afternoon, Jake invited me to a family barbecue. "I want you to meet them," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "They're going to love you." As we pulled up to a charming suburban home, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. My own family was a mess. Parents who weren't really my parents, a sister I barely spoke to. What if Jake's family saw right through me? But the moment we stepped through the door, I was enveloped in warmth. Jake's mother, Linda, pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh, Rose, we've heard so much about you. Welcome, sweetheart." Jake's father, Robert, shook my hand with a twinkle in his eye. "So you're the brilliant architect who's stolen our boy's heart, eh?" And then there was Ella, Jake's younger sister. She bounded up to me, full of energy. "Rose, Jake says you're amazing at your job. I'm thinking about studying architecture too. Can I pick your brain sometime?" As the afternoon wore on, I found myself relaxing, drawn into the easy banter and genuine affection of Jake's family. It was everything I'd always longed for, but never had. Later, as Jake and I sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Rose, I know we haven't known each other long, but I think you might be the one. I've never felt this way about anyone before." My heart raced. Part of me wanted to throw caution to the wind and dive headfirst into this fairy tale, but the other part, the part still reeling from the revelation about my parents, held back. "Jake, I hesitated, torn between my growing feelings and my fear of being hurt again. "There's something I need to tell you. About my family." He squeezed my hand. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. You're part of our family now, Rose." As I looked into his earnest eyes, I felt a mix of hope and trepidation. Could I really trust this perfect picture? Or was I setting myself up for another heartbreak? The weeks flew by in a whirlwind of happiness. Jake and I grew closer, and I found myself spending more time with his family, especially Ella. One sunny afternoon, we sat in her room, surrounded by college brochures and architecture magazines. "Rose, I can't thank you enough for helping me with this," Ella said, her eyes shining with excitement. "I never thought I'd actually have a shot at getting into a top architecture program." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "You've got real talent, Ella, and determination. That's half the battle right there." She bit her lip, hesitating. "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded, curious. "Jake mentioned you don't talk to your family much. I hope you don't mind me asking, but why?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't told Jake's family about the DNA test results yet. "It's complicated," I said softly. "I recently found out some unsettling information about my parents. I'm still processing it." Ella's eyes widened. "Oh, Rose, I'm so sorry, but you know you have us now, right? You're like the big sister I never had." Her words touched me deeply, and I felt tears prick at my eyes. "Thank you, Ella. That means more than you know." As I left Ella's room, I nearly collided with Jake in the hallway. His face lit up when he saw me, and before I could say a word, he dropped to one knee. My heart stopped. "Rose," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I know this might seem fast, but when you know, you know. You've brought so much joy and love into my life. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to spin around me. Part of me wanted to scream yes immediately, but the other part, the part still reeling from the revelation about my parents, hesitated. "Jake, I don't know what to say," I stammered. His face fell slightly, but he rallied. "You don't have to answer right now. Just think about it, okay?" I nodded, my mind whirling. The next day at work, I was still in a daze when Leonard knocked on my office door. "Rose, you okay? You seem distracted." I looked up at him, suddenly realizing I needed to talk to someone. "Jake proposed?" I blurted out. Leonard's face went through a series of rapid emotions before settling on a forced smile. "That's wonderful, isn't it?" I sighed. "I don't know, Leonard. It's all happening so fast, and with everything going on with my family." He sat down across from me, his eyes filled with concern. "Rose, you know you can always talk to me, right? About anything." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted outside my office. The door burst open, and Jake strode in, followed by a crowd of our coworkers. "Surprise!" they all shouted. I stared in shock as Jake grinned and held up a banner that read, "Congratulations on your engagement." "I know you haven't officially said yes yet," Jake said, his eyes twinkling. But I figured a little encouragement couldn't hurt. As our colleagues swarmed around us offering congratulations, I felt overwhelmed. Jake slipped a ring onto my finger, and I stared at it, feeling a mix of elation and panic. I caught Leonard's eye across the room. He looked stricken, and in that moment I realized there was more to his feelings for me than just friendship. Jake's arm around me tightened, and he whispered in my ear, "I can't wait to start our life together, Rose, you, me, and my family. It's going to be perfect." As the impromptu party swirled around me, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. On one side was the promise of the family I'd always dreamed of. On the other, a nagging doubt that wouldn't let go. What had I gotten myself into? And more importantly, how was I going to get out if I needed to? The whirlwind of wedding preparations swept me off my feet. Between dress fittings, venue tours, and endless decisions about flowers and centerpieces, I barely had time to breathe, let alone think about the nagging doubts in the back of my mind. One evening, as Jake and I collapsed onto the couch after another marathon planning session, he dropped a bombshell. "Honey, I've been thinking," he said, his voice casual. "What if we moved in with my parents after the wedding?" I sat up straight, my heart racing. "What? Why would we do that?" Jake shrugged. "It makes sense financially. We could save for a down payment on our own place faster. Plus, Mom and Dad would love having us around." I tried to keep the panic out of my voice. "But Jake, we're starting our life together. Don't you want some privacy?" He took my hand, his eyes earnest. "Rose, my family is everything to me. I thought you understood that. Don't you want to be part of it?" Guilt washed over me. Jake's family had been so welcoming, so loving. How could I deny them? And yet, the thought of giving up my independence made me feel physically ill. I need to think about it," I stammered. Jake's face fell. "What's there to think about? Don't you trust me?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leonard. "Hope wedding plans are going well. Miss seeing you around the office. Coffee soon?" I quickly put the phone away, feeling a pang of something. Regret? Longing? I pushed the thought aside. The next day I found myself at Jake's parents' house, ostensibly to discuss wedding details with his mother Linda. As we sat in the kitchen, surrounded by bridal magazines, she broached the subject. "Jake told us about his idea," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Oh, Rose, we'd be so thrilled to have you here. You're already like a daughter to us." I forced a smile. "It's a big decision, Linda. I'm not sure." She waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. Family takes care of family. You'll see. It'll be wonderful." Just then, Ella burst into the kitchen, her face alight with excitement. "Rose, I got in. The architecture program at State U." I jumped up, genuinely thrilled for her. "Ella, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." As we hugged, I caught Linda's eye. Her smile seemed calculating. "You see, Rose, you've already had such an impact on our Ella. Imagine how much more you could do living here." I felt trapped, cornered by their expectations, my conflicting desires. That night, as I tossed and turned in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control of my own life. The next morning, I arrived at work early, desperate for some peace. To my surprise, Leonard was already there, concern etched on his face. "Rose," he said softly, "what's going on? You've seemed off lately." Something in his gentle tone broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was spilling everything. The DNA test, Jake's proposal, the pressure to move in with his family. Leonard listened without judgment, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he took a deep breath. "Rose, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. You deserve to be happy. Really, truly happy, not just going along with what others want for you." His words hit me like a thunderbolt. I realized I'd been so caught up in trying to please everyone else, I'd lost sight of what I truly wanted. "I need to talk to Jake," I said, standing up abruptly. "I need to be honest with him and with myself." As I headed for the door, Leonard called out, "Rose, whatever happens, I'm here for you." I nodded, my heart pounding. It was time to take control of my own story. I stood outside Jake's parents' house, my heart pounding. After my conversation with Leonard, I knew I had to confront Jake about my doubts. But as I reached for the doorbell, I heard raised voices from inside. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crept around to the open kitchen window. "Can't believe how perfectly this is working out," Linda's voice drifted out. "Once Rose moves in, we'll have access to her entire salary." I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. Jake's voice responded, sounding uncertain. "Mom, I'm not sure about this. Rose trusts us. It feels wrong to." "Don't be naive, Jake," Robert cut in. "This is our chance to finally get out of debt. Your little architect girlfriend is our ticket to financial freedom." My world tilted on its axis. The family I thought had welcomed me with open arms had been plotting to use me all along. Ella's voice piped up, "But what about Rose's career? She's so talented, and she's been helping me." Linda scoffed. "Oh, please, once she's part of this family, her career will be the least of our concerns. She'll be too busy taking care of us." I stumbled back from the window, bile rising in my throat. How could I have been so blind? The warmth, the acceptance, it had all been a carefully crafted lie. In a daze, I made my way back to my car. As I drove home, my mind raced. What was I going to do? The wedding was in 2 weeks. Invitations had been sent, deposits paid. And Jake? Had he been in on this from the beginning? Back in my apartment, I paced restlessly. I couldn't marry Jake, not now. But how could I call off the wedding without revealing what I'd overheard? Would anyone even believe me? My phone buzzed incessantly, texts from Jake, Linda, Ella. I ignored them all. Instead, I found myself dialing a different number. Leonard, I need your help. His voice was steady, calming. I'm here, Rose. What do you need? Can you meet me at the courthouse tomorrow? There's something I need to do. The next morning, Leonard and I stood in line at the marriage license office. My hand shook as I filled out the cancellation form. Are you sure about this, Rose? Leonard asked gently. I nodded, fighting back tears. I have to. You didn't hear them, Leonard. They were planning to use me, to take my money. It was all a lie. As we left the courthouse, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by a new anxiety. What would happen when Jake and his family found out? My phone rang. Jake's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Rose, where have you been? We've all been worried sick. I steeled myself. Jake, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the park? An hour later, I sat on a bench watching Jake approach. His face lit up when he saw me, and for a moment I almost wavered. But then I remembered the cold calculation in Linda's voice, the way they had discussed using me like I was nothing more than a means to an end. Jake, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. There's something I need to tell you. As I spoke, I saw the color drain from his face. By the time I finished, he looked like a stranger. Rose, I don't know what to say. I swear I didn't know about this. I stood up, my decision solidified. It doesn't matter, Jake. I can't be part of a family built on lies and manipulation. The wedding is off. As I walked away, leaving Jake stunned on the bench, I felt a mix of grief and relief. The fairy tale was over, but maybe now I could start writing my own story, one where I was the author of my own happiness. I stood in the driveway of Jake's family home, my suitcases at my feet. Despite everything I'd overheard, despite canceling the marriage license in secret, I found myself moving in with them. Jake had been so apologetic, swearing he knew nothing about his family's plans. He begged me to give them a chance, to let him prove his love was real. And like a fool, I agreed. Linda threw open the front door, her smile wide but her eyes calculating. Rose, darling, welcome home. I forced a smile, reminding myself this was temporary. I just needed time to figure out my next move. Jake carried my bags upstairs to what would be our room. As he set them down, he pulled me close. I'm so glad you're here, Rose. We're going to be so happy, I promise. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The first few days were a whirlwind of false cheer and thinly veiled expectations. Linda constantly hovered, asking about my work schedule, my salary, my benefits package. Robert made offhand comments about the family's financial struggles, hinting at how much my contribution would help. On the fourth night, as we sat down to dinner, Linda cleared her throat. Rose, dear, we've been thinking. Since you're part of the family now, it only makes sense for you to contribute to the household expenses. I nearly choked on my water. Excuse me? Jake squeezed my hand under the table. Mom, we talked about this. Rose just moved in. We can't. Linda waved him off. Nonsense. Rose understands, don't you, dear? Family helps family. I felt trapped, cornered. I suppose I could contribute something. Robert leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Excellent. We were thinking your entire salary would be a good start. The room spun. My entire salary? But what about my own expenses? My savings? Linda laughed, a brittle sound. Oh, Rose, you don't need to worry about that anymore. We'll take care of everything. I looked at Jake, silently pleading for him to say something. Anything. But he just stared at his plate, avoiding my gaze. Ella, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. This isn't right. You can't just take all of Rose's money. Ella, be quiet, Linda snapped. The adults are talking. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I need some air. I fled to the backyard, my mind reeling. How had I let things get this far? I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over Leonard's number. But before I could call, Jake appeared beside me. Rose, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they would ask for your entire salary. We can figure something else out. I turned to him, really looking at him for the first time since I'd moved in. Did you know, Jake, about their plans to use me? He hesitated, and in that moment I knew. The betrayal cut deep. I thought I could protect you, he whispered. I thought once we were married, I could make them see reason. I stepped back, my voice shaking. You lied to me. You're just as bad as they are. Jake reached for me, but I pushed past him, running back into the house. I needed to get out to escape this nightmare I'd willingly walked into. But as I reached the front door, Linda blocked my path. Where do you think you're going? I'm leaving, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Linda's eyes narrowed. I don't think so, dear. You see, we've already made some financial arrangements based on your contribution. You can't just walk away now. Robert appeared behind her, his face grim. You're part of this family now, Rose, for better or worse. As they closed in around me, I realized with horror that I was trapped. Not just financially, but physically. The fairy tale had become a nightmare, and I was the prisoner in the tower. In that moment, I knew I had to find a way out, no matter the cost. But how? My heart raced as I paced the confines of my room. No, my prison. It had been 3 days since Linda and Robert's ultimatum, and I felt the walls closing in. Jake had been suspiciously absent, claiming work emergencies. I knew I had to act, and fast. A soft knock on the door startled me. Rose? It's Ella. Can I come in? I hesitated, then opened the door. Ella's eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never meant for this to happen. In that moment, I saw my way out. Ella, I need your help. Can you trust me? She nodded, determination replacing the fear in her eyes. Over the next hour, we hatched a plan. Ella would create a distraction, allowing me to access the family's financial records. If I could find proof of their schemes, I could expose them. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, Ella knocked over a vase, shattering it across the floor. As Linda and Robert rushed to clean up, I slipped into Robert's study. My hands shook as I rifled through drawers and files. Finally, I found what I was looking for: bank statements, loan documents, all pointing to a web of financial deceit. They weren't just planning to use my money, they were drowning in debt and saw me as their lifeline. I quickly snapped photos with my phone, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it downstairs. Just as I finished, the door creaked open. Jake stood there, his face a mask of betrayal. Rose, what are you doing? I straightened up, clutching my phone. Finding the truth, Jake. The truth you've been hiding from me. His eyes darted to the scattered papers, realization dawning. Rose, please, let me explain. Explain what? I spat. How you and your family plan to use me, to steal my money, my future? Jake reached for me, but I backed away. I love you, Rose. I thought if we got married, I could fix things, make it right. By lying to me? By trapping me in this house? Anger and hurt coursed through me. That's not love, Jake. That's manipulation. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Linda's shrill voice called out, Jake? Is everything all right? I knew it was now or never. Pushing past Jake, I ran down the stairs, nearly colliding with Linda and Robert at the bottom. What's going on? Robert demanded, his eyes narrowing as he saw my phone clutched in my hand. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I know everything, the debts, the schemes, all of it, and I'm leaving. Linda's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... No! I cut her off. I'm done being manipulated. I've canceled our marriage registration, and I have proof of your financial fraud. If you try to stop me, I'll go straight to the police. The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Jake appeared at the top of the stairs, his face ashen. Rose, please. I turned to him, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. It's over, Jake. All of it. As I moved towards the door, Ella appeared, my packed suitcase in hand. Linda lunged for her, but Robert held her back, defeat evident in his slumped shoulders. You'll regret this, Linda hissed. You're nothing without us. I paused at the door, looking back at the family that had nearly destroyed me. No, I'm everything without you, and I'm taking my life back. With that, I stepped out into the cool night air, Ella right behind me. As we drove away, the weight of the past few months began to lift. Where will you go? Ella asked softly. I thought of Leonard, of the office, of the life I'd nearly lost. Home, I said. I'm going home. As the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I felt a mix of relief and trepidation. I had escaped, but at what cost? And what challenges lay ahead as I reclaimed my life and my identity? The office felt both familiar and strange as I walked through the doors for the first time in weeks. Whispers followed me down the hallway, but I held my head high. I'd faced worse than office gossip. Leonard was the first to approach me, concern etched on his face. Rose, are you all right? we've all been so worried. I managed a small smile. I'm getting there. It's been a rough few weeks. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. If you need anything, I'm here. As the days passed, I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the clean lines and precise calculations of architecture. Slowly, the whispers died down, replaced by a newfound respect from my colleagues. They'd seen me weather a storm and come out stronger. One evening, as I was packing up to leave, Leonard appeared at my door. Rose, I'm glad you're back, and I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Something in his voice made me look up. The care and admiration in his eyes took my breath away. How had I never noticed it before? Thank you, Leonard, I said softly, for everything. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I focused on rebuilding my career and my sense of self. Ella called occasionally, updating me on her progress in architecture school and assuring me that Jake's family was facing the consequences of their actions. Through it all, Leonard was a steady presence, offering support without pressure. Our friendship deepened, conversations flowing easily over shared lunches and late-night work sessions. It was on one such evening, as we pored over blueprints for a new project, that Leonard suddenly set down his pencil. Rose, there's something I need to tell you. My heart skipped a beat. What is it? He took a deep breath. I've had feelings for you for a long time. I never said anything because, well, timing never seemed right. But after everything that's happened, I realized life's too short to stay silent. I stared at him, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. Fear, excitement, hope. Leonard, he held up a hand. You don't have to say anything now. I know you've been through a lot. I just wanted you to know. In that moment, looking into his kind eyes, I saw a future I'd never dared to imagine before. A partnership based on mutual respect and genuine care. Actually, I said, my voice stronger than I expected, I do have something to say. Yes. His eyebrows shot up. Yes? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Yes, I have feelings for you too. And yes, I'd like to see where this goes. The smile that spread across his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. We took things slow, both of us aware of the weight of our shared history and my recent experiences. But with each passing day, I felt more certain that this was right. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Leonard and I stood on the rooftop garden of our latest project. The city lights twinkled below us, a testament to the beauty we'd created together. Leonard turned to me, his eyes shining. Rose, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You're not just my partner in work, but in every aspect of life. I can't imagine a future without you by my side. My breath caught as he dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Rose Thompson, will you marry me? Tears blurred my vision as I looked at the man before me. A man who had stood by me through my darkest times, who valued me for who I was, not what I could give him. Yes, I whispered, then louder. Yes. As Leonard slipped the ring on my finger and pulled me into an embrace, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led me here, to a love built on trust, respect, and genuine partnership. I had lost a false fairy tale, but gained something far more precious, a real, enduring love story of my own. I froze at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The sounds coming from our bedroom were unmistakable, a woman's giggle followed by my husband Ted's low chuckle. My hands trembled as I gripped the banister, willing myself to move. "Oh, Ted," a breathy voice cooed. "You're so bad." I felt bile rise in my throat. This couldn't be happening, not in our home, not in our bed. With shaky steps, I approached the partially open door. I should have turned and run, pretended I'd never heard a thing. But my body moved of its own accord, pushing the door wide. The sight before me knocked the wind from my lungs. Ted, my husband of 15 years, tangled in our sheets with a woman I recognized as Lisa from his office. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. "Natalie?" Ted scrambled to cover himself, nearly tumbling off the bed. I can explain." I stood frozen, unable to form words as Lisa gathered her clothes, face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she mumbled, ducking past me and fleeing down the stairs. The slam of the front door jolted me back to reality. I turned to Ted, who was hastily pulling on his pants. "Explain?" I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Explain how you could do this to me?" To our family? Ted ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Natalie, please, it's not what you think. Not what I think. My voice rose, anger finally breaking through the shock. I just caught you in bed with another woman, in our home. Keep your voice down, Ted hissed. The boys might hear. I laughed bitterly. Oh, now you're worried about the boys? Where was that concern when you were screwing your coworker? Ted's face hardened. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of obsessing over the kids all the time, this wouldn't have happened. His words hit me like a slap. Are you seriously blaming me for your affair? It's not an affair, Ted insisted. It was a mistake, a one-time thing. Don't lie to me, I spat. I've seen the way you look at her at company parties. How long has this been going on? Ted's silence was all the answer I needed. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs no longer able to support me. I gave up everything for you, I whispered. My career, my independence, and this is how you repay me? Natalie, please. Ted knelt before me, reaching for my hands. I jerked away from his touch. We can work through this, for the boys' sake. The mention of our children snapped something inside me. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking Ted over. Don't you dare use our sons as an excuse, I snarled. You should have thought about them before you invited that woman into our bed. I stormed out of the room, Ted's pleas falling on deaf ears. In a daze, I found myself in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter as sobs racked my body. The sound of small feet on the stairs made me hastily wipe my eyes. 10-year-old Jake appeared in the doorway, his younger brother Ethan close behind. Mom? Jake's brow furrowed with concern. Are you okay? We heard yelling. I forced a smile, my heart breaking at the worry in his eyes. Everything's fine, sweetie. Mommy and Daddy just had a little disagreement. Jake didn't look convinced, but nodded slowly. Okay, can we have some ice cream? Sure, I said, grateful for the distraction. As I scooped Rocky Road into bowls, my mind raced. What was I going to do? How could I face Ted after this? And most importantly, how would I protect my boys from the fallout of their father's betrayal? One thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I stared at the framed photo on my nightstand, a reminder of happier times. Ted and I on our wedding day, faces beaming with hope and love. How quickly things had changed. The bedroom door creaked open, and Ted's reflection appeared in the mirror. Natalie, we need to talk, I turned, steeling myself. About what? How you destroyed our marriage? Ted sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Remember how good we used to be together? His words transported me back to our early days. I'd been a rising star at my marketing firm, burning the midnight oil to climb the corporate ladder. Then I met Ted. You swept me off my feet, I said softly. Made me believe in fairy tales. Ted's eyes lit up. We can have that again. I'll do whatever it takes. I shook my head, the spell broken. No, Ted. You don't get it. This isn't just about the affair. It's about everything that led to it. What do you mean? Remember when you convinced me to quit my job? I asked, anger rising. You promised to take care of me, said we'd be partners, but that's not what happened, is it? Ted's face darkened. I provide for this family. What more do you want? A husband who respects me, I shot back. Who doesn't treat me like a glorified maid and nanny? That's not fair, Ted protested. I work hard to give you and the boys everything. Everything except your time and attention, I countered. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about bills or the kids' schedules? Ted fell silent, unable to meet my gaze. I gave up my career for you, I continued, years of resentment pouring out. And what did I get in return? A husband who's never home, who belittles my contributions, who seeks comfort in another woman's arms. I said I was sorry about Lisa, Ted mumbled. Sorry isn't enough, I exploded. Do you have any idea how it feels to discover your husband's betrayal in your own home? To realize that the life you've built is a lie? Ted's jaw clenched. You're not innocent in this, Natalie. You've been distant for years, always focused on the kids, never making time for us. His words hit like a punch to the gut. Are you seriously blaming me for your affair? I'm saying we're both responsible for the state of our marriage, Ted replied, his voice rising. But you're acting like I'm the only one at fault here. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize neglecting you justified sleeping with your coworker. That's not what I meant, and you know it, Ted growled. I'm trying to have an honest conversation here, But you're twisting everything I say. Honest? I scoffed. That's rich coming from you. How long would you have continued lying to me if I hadn't caught you? Ted's silence spoke volumes. That's what I thought, I said, turning away. I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight. Natalie, please, Ted pleaded. We can work through this, for the boy's sake, if nothing else. I whirled back to face him, fury blazing in my chest. Don't you dare use our children as an excuse. You should have thought about them before you invited that woman into our bed. Ted's face crumpled. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love you, Natalie. I love our family. Please give me another chance. For a moment, I wavered. The pain in his eyes was genuine, and part of me longed to believe him. But then I remembered the sounds of his laughter with Lisa, the casual way he'd blamed me for his infidelity. I need time, I said finally. Time to think, to figure out what I want. Can you give me that? Ted nodded slowly. Whatever you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. As he left the room, I sank onto the bed, my mind reeling. Could we salvage our marriage? Did I even want to try? One thing was certain, I couldn't continue living in this limbo. Something had to change, and soon. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers in front of me. The weight of my decision pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. A week had passed since I'd caught Ted with Lisa, and the wound still felt raw. The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my thoughts. Ted walked in, his eyes immediately landing on the papers. What's this? He asked, his voice tight. I took a deep breath. I think you know, Ted. I can't do this anymore. His face contorted with anger. You're seriously considering divorce? After everything we've been through? Everything we've been through? I echoed, incredulous. You mean your affair? Ted slammed his hand on the table, making me flinch. For God's sake, Natalie, I made a mistake. How many times do I have to apologize? It's not just about the affair, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. It's about years of neglect, of feeling like I don't matter. That's not fair. Ted growled. I've provided for this family, given you everything you could want. Except respect, I shot back, except partnership. Ted's eyes narrowed. Is that what this is about? You feeling unappreciated? Maybe if you'd put as much effort into our marriage as you did into being a martyr, we wouldn't be in this mess. His words hit me like a physical blow. I stood up, hands shaking. Get out. This is my house, Ted sneered. You don't get to tell me what to do. Your house? I laughed bitterly. The one I've kept running while you were off playing house with your mistress? Ted's face flushed with rage. He took a step toward me, and for a moment I was afraid he might strike me. Instead, he spun on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed into the chair, tears streaming down my face. How had we come to this? The man I'd loved, the father of my children, now a stranger filled with anger and resentment. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was a text from my sister, Leah. How are you holding up? Want to talk? Relief washed over me. I needed my big sister now more than ever. An hour later, I sat on Leah's couch, pouring out my heart. She listened patiently, her kind eyes filled with concern. Oh, Natalie, she sighed when I finished. I'm so sorry you're going through this, but honey, you need to stand up for yourself. Ted doesn't get to dictate your worth. I nodded, wiping away tears. I know, but it's hard. We've been together so long, and the boys. Leah took my hands in hers. Listen to me. You deserve happiness. You deserve respect, and your boys deserve to see their mother valued and strong. But what if I can't do it? I whispered. What if I'm not strong enough? You are, Leah said firmly. You're one of the strongest women I know. You just need to remember that. As I drove home, Leah's words echoed in my mind. She was right. I'd let Ted chip away at my confidence for too long. It was time to reclaim my power. I walked into the house, steeling myself for another confrontation. But the sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Ted sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. For everything. You're right, I've been a terrible husband. I don't deserve you. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out. But then I remembered Leah's words. You're right, I said quietly. You don't deserve me. Not anymore. Ted's face crumpled. Natalie, please. I'll do anything. Go to counseling, quit my job, whatever you want. I shook my head. It's too late, Ted. I've made my decision. As I turned to leave the room, Ted called out, desperation in his voice. "What about the boys? Don't they deserve a chance at a whole family?" I paused, my hand on the doorframe. They deserve parents who respect each other, who show them what real love looks like. I looked back at him, my voice steady. And that's what I intend to give them, with or without you. With those words, I walked away, leaving Ted and the remnants of our broken marriage behind. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. My future, on my own terms. I watched the boys' faces as we pulled up to Leah's house, our car packed with hastily thrown together suitcases. Jake, at 10, wore a frown of confusion. 6-year-old Ethan's eyes were wide with excitement at the prospect of a vacation at Aunt Leah's. "Mom, why isn't Dad coming?" Jake asked as we unloaded the car. I swallowed hard. "Dad needs to stay at our house for work, sweetie. We're going to have a little break here with Aunt Leah." Jake's frown deepened, but he didn't press further. I silently thanked God for small mercies. Leah enveloped us in a warm hug as we entered. "Welcome, troops. I've got the guest rooms all set up for you." As the boys explored the house, Leah pulled me aside. "How are you holding up?" I felt my carefully constructed facade crumble. "I don't know how I'm going to do this, Leah. I haven't worked in years. How am I supposed to support the boys on my own?" Leah squeezed my hand. "One step at a time, sis. Remember Dana from your old job? She called earlier asking about you. Said there might be some freelance work available if you're interested." Hope fluttered in my chest. "Really? I haven't done marketing in so long." "You're still sharp as a tack," Leah insisted. "Give her a call. What have you got to lose?" That night after the boys were asleep, I dialed Dana's number with trembling fingers. "Natalie?" Dana's warm voice brought back memories of late nights brainstorming campaigns. "I'm so glad you called. How are you?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm going through some changes. Leah mentioned you might have some work?" "Absolutely," Dana said. "We've got a new client who needs a fresh perspective. It's remote work, perfect for juggling with family commitments." My heart raced. "That sounds amazing, Dana, but it's been years since I've worked. I'm not sure I'm qualified anymore." Dana's laugh was reassuring. "Natalie, you were one of the best in the business. That talent doesn't just disappear. Why don't you start with a small project and see how it goes?" We chatted for an hour, discussing the project and catching up. By the time we hung up, I felt a glimmer of my old confidence returning. The next morning, I woke early to start work before the boys were up. As I logged into my laptop, a notification popped up, an email from Ted. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. I opened it. "Natalie, I can't believe you just left like that. What about our family, our vows? You're abandoning your duties as a wife and mother. The boys need stability, not your selfish whims. Come home immediately, or there will be consequences." Ted. Rage boiled in my veins. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he had the audacity to accuse me of abandonment? I was halfway through a scathing reply when Ethan's sleepy voice interrupted me. "Mommy, can we have pancakes?" I closed the laptop, pushing thoughts of Ted aside. "Of course, sweetie. Let's wake up Jake and Aunt Leah and make it a pancake party." As we gathered in Leah's sunny kitchen, the boys giggling as they mixed batter and made a mess, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was what mattered, not Ted's accusations or my fears about the future. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Ted. "Where are you? We need to talk. Now." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to lash out, to hurt him as he'd hurt me. But as I watched the boys playing in Leah's backyard, I knew I had to be the bigger person. I typed out a simple response. "We're safe. I'll have my lawyer contact you about arrangements for the boys." As I hit send, a sense of calm washed over me. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. It wouldn't be easy, but with Leah's support and this new opportunity with Dana, I finally felt hope for the future. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a silent promise to myself and my sons. We would not just survive this, we would thrive. I was in the middle of a conference call with Dana and our new client when the doorbell rang. Leah answered it, and moments later I heard raised voices from the foyer. "Where is she?" Ted's angry voice carried through the house. My heart raced. I quickly muted my microphone and whispered to Dana, "Family emergency. I'll call you back." Stepping into the hallway, I saw Ted towering over Leah, his face red with anger. "Ted," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What are you doing here?" He whirled to face me. "What am I doing here? What are you doing here, Natalie? You can't just take the boys and disappear." "I told you we were safe," I replied, fighting to keep my voice calm. I needed time to think. Ted scoffed. "Think about what? How to destroy our family." Leah stepped between us. "I think you should leave, Ted. This isn't the time or place for this conversation." "Stay out of this, Leah," Ted snapped. "This is between me and my wife." "Don't talk to her like that," I said, anger rising in my chest. "Leah's been more supportive than you've been in years." Ted's eyes narrowed. "Oh, so that's what this is about? You feeling unsupported? I work my ass off to provide for this family, and this is the thanks I get." "Provide?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean control. You've spent years making me dependent on you, isolating me from my career, my friends." "I gave you everything," Ted shouted. "A beautiful home, vacations, the best schools for the boys. And you throw it all away for what? Some misguided notion of independence?" The boys appeared at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed and frightened. Seeing them, I made a decision. "Boys, go to your room," I said firmly. "Mom and Dad need to talk." Once they were out of earshot, I turned back to Ted. "This isn't working. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us. Ted's face paled. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," I replied. "I've already spoken to a lawyer." "A lawyer?" Ted's voice rose again. "So you've been planning this all along? While I've been trying to save our marriage?" I shook my head. "Save our marriage? By blaming me for your affair? By trying to control my every move?" "I made a mistake with Lisa," Ted said, his tone softening. "But I love you, Natalie. We can work this out." For a moment, I wavered. Then I remembered the years of neglect, the constant belittling, the way he'd made me doubt myself. "No, Ted," I said quietly. "We can't. It's too late." Ted's face hardened. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, I'll see you in court. Don't expect to take me for everything I'm worth." "This isn't about money," I replied. "It's about respect, something you clearly don't understand." As Ted stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Leah wrapped me in a hug. "I'm proud of you, sis," she whispered. Upstairs, I found the boys huddled together on Jake's bed. "Is Dad gone?" Ethan asked, his voice small. I sat down, pulling them both close. "Yes, sweetie, Dad's gone home." "Are we going back?" Jake asked. I took a deep breath. "No, honey, we're going to stay here with Aunt Leah for a while. Dad and we need some time apart." "Are you getting divorced?" Jake's eyes filled with tears. My heart broke, but I knew I had to be honest. "Yes, sweetheart, but I want you both to know that this doesn't change how much we love you. You're the most important things in our lives." As I held my boys, comforting them through their tears, I felt a surge of determination. I would build a new life for us, one filled with love, respect, and independence. It wouldn't be easy, but looking at Jake and Ethan, I knew it would be worth it. Later that night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Ted. "This isn't over. I'll fight you every step of the way." I stared at the screen, a mix of fear and resolve washing over me. Then I typed out a response. "Bring it on. I'm done being your doormat." As I hit send, I knew there was no turning back. The battle for my freedom and my children's future had begun. 6 months had passed since I'd left Ted, and life had taken on a new rhythm. I'd thrown myself into work, quickly becoming one of Dana's most valuable freelancers. The boys were settling into their new school, making friends and slowly healing from the upheaval of our family. I was in the middle of a crucial client presentation when my phone buzzed insistently. Ignoring it, I focused on my pitch. As soon as I ended the call, I saw a flurry of missed calls and texts from Leah. "Natalie, call me ASAP. It's about Ted." My heart raced as I dialed her number. "Leah, what's wrong?" "Ted's here," she said, her voice tight. "He's demanding to see the boys, says he has court papers." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What? No, that's impossible. We have a custody agreement." "He's saying you violated it by moving without his consent. Natalie, he's threatening to take the boys." Panic clawed at my throat. "I'm on my way. Don't let him near them." I sped to Leah's house, my mind whirling. How could this be happening? We'd been so careful with the legal arrangements. As I pulled up, I saw Ted's car in the driveway. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation. The scene inside was chaos. Ted stood in the living room waving papers and shouting. Leah stood between him and the stairs, where I could hear the boys crying. "Ted, stop this!" I yelled, slamming the door behind me. "You're scaring the children." He whirled to face me, eyes blazing. "You've left me no choice, Natalie. You think you can just take my sons and cut me out of their lives?" "That's not what I'm doing," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We have an agreement. You see them every other weekend." "An agreement you broke when you moved them without my permission," Ted snarled. "I have rights, and I'm going to exercise them." I snatched the papers from his hand, scanning them quickly. My blood ran cold. He was right. There was a clause about relocating without mutual consent. "This is low, even for you," I hissed, "using the boys as pawns in your game." Ted's face softened slightly. "I don't want to do this, Natalie. Come home. We can work this out." For a moment, I wavered. The thought of losing my children was unbearable. But then I remembered why I'd left. The years of emotional abuse, the affair, the way he'd slowly chipped away at my self-worth. "No," I said firmly. "We're not coming back. This is our home now." Ted's expression hardened. "Fine, then I'll see you in court. I'll fight for full custody if I have to." As he stormed out, I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking. Leah sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. "I can't lose them, Leah." "We'll figure it out," she said. "I'll call my lawyer friend. We'll fight this." I nodded, trying to believe her words. But doubt gnawed at me. How could I compete with Ted's resources? His connections? The sound of small feet on the stairs made me look up. Jake and Ethan stood there, tears streaking their faces. "Mom?" Jake's voice trembled. "Are we going to have to live with Dad?" I held out my arms, and they ran to me. Holding them close, I made a silent vow. I would not let Ted win. I would not let him destroy the new life we'd built. "No, sweetie," I said. My voice stronger than I felt. "We're staying right here. I promise." As I comforted my boys, my mind raced. I needed a plan. I needed to prove I could provide for them, that this new life was better for everyone. My phone buzzed, a text from Dana. "Client loved your pitch. They want to offer you a full-time position." I stared at the screen, a glimmer of hope piercing through the darkness. This could be it, the key to securing our future. Looking at my sons, then at Leah, I felt a surge of determination. Ted might have money and power, but I had love, resilience, and a newfound strength he couldn't begin to understand. The battle for my children's future had begun, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. 1 year after leaving Ted, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone was the timid housewife, replaced by a confident professional in a crisp blazer. I'd not only accepted Dana's full-time offer, but had quickly climbed the ranks to become a senior marketing executive. As I adjusted my necklace, a gift from Leah to celebrate my promotion, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. "Urgent news about Ted. Call ASAP." My stomach clenched. The custody battle had been brutal, with Ted using every dirty trick in the book. But we'd been holding our ground thanks to my new job and the stability we'd built. "What's happened?" I asked as soon as my lawyer picked up. "Ted's filed for emergency custody," she said, her voice grim. "He's claiming you're an unfit mother due to your work schedule." The room spun. "What? That's ridiculous! I've been over backwards to balance work and the boys." "I know, Natalie, but he's presenting a compelling case. We need to meet immediately to strategize." As I hung up, Leah appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "What's wrong?" I filled her in, my voice shaking. "How can he do this? After everything he's put us through?" Leah's eyes flashed with anger. "That bastard. He can't stand seeing you succeed without him." Just then, Jake and Ethan burst into the room, backpacks on and ready for school. Their smiles faded as they saw my face. "Mom?" Jake asked. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Just some work stress." As I hugged them goodbye, my heart ached. How could I tell them their father was trying to take them away? The day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By the time I got home, I was exhausted and terrified. Leah was waiting with a glass of wine and a sympathetic ear. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," I confessed, tears streaming down my face. "Maybe I should just give in, go back to Ted." Leah grabbed my shoulders. "Don't you dare. You've come too far to give up now." Just then my phone rang. It was Dana. "Natalie, I hate to do this, but we need you in New York next week for the Johnson pitch. It's make or break for the company. My heart sank. A week away from the boys, right when Ted was pushing for custody? But if I said no, I could lose the job that was keeping us afloat. I'll be there, I said, my voice hollow. As I hung up, Leah looked at me with concern. You can't go. Not now. I have to, I replied. If I lose this job, Ted wins. He'll prove I can't provide for the boys. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for work, Jake appeared in the kitchen, his young face serious. Mom, are you and Dad fighting again? I knelt down, meeting his eyes. Honey, your dad and we're having some disagreements about where you and Ethan should live. Jake's lip trembled. I don't want to live with Dad. I want to stay here with you and Aunt Leah. I pulled him close, fighting back tears. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that happens. I promise. As I watched Jake board the school bus, my resolve strengthened. I couldn't let Ted win. Not when the boys' happiness was at stake. That evening, as I packed for New York, my lawyer called again. Natalie, Ted's lawyer, reached out. They're proposing a settlement. My heart raced. What kind of settlement? Full custody to Ted with visitation rights for you. The room spun. No, absolutely not. Natalie, given your work commitments and the upcoming trip, it might be worth considering. No, I interrupted, my voice steel. I will not give up my children. Tell Ted and his lawyers we'll see them in court. As I hung up, I caught sight of myself in the mirror again. The woman staring back was fierce, determined, and ready for battle. Bring it on, Ted, I whispered. I'm not the woman you married anymore, and I'm sure as hell not going down without a fight. I stood outside the courtroom, my heart pounding. Today was the final custody hearing, the culmination of months of legal battles and emotional turmoil. As I smoothed my blazer, Leah squeezed my hand. You've got this, sis, she whispered. No matter what happens in there, you've already won by becoming the strong woman you are today. I nodded, drawing strength from her words. As we entered the courtroom, I caught sight of Ted. He looked haggard, his once crisp suit rumpled, and his eyes bloodshot. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, quickly replaced by steely resolve. The judge called the court to order, and Ted's lawyer began his final argument. He painted a picture of me as a career-obsessed mother who had abandoned her family. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream out in protest. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall, meeting the judge's eyes. Your Honor, a year ago, I was a different woman. I had lost myself in a marriage that had become toxic and controlling. But leaving Ted wasn't about abandoning my family, it was about saving it. I gestured to the portfolio my lawyer had submitted. In the past year, I've built a successful career, providing stability and financial security for my children. But more importantly, I've shown them what it means to be strong, to stand up for yourself, and to create a loving home. As I spoke, I saw Ted's face crumple. For the first time, I realized he wasn't just angry, he was broken. The judge listened intently, asking pointed questions about my work schedule and the boys' well-being. When she finally called a recess to consider her decision, I felt drained but hopeful. In the hallway, Ted approached me, his eyes red-rimmed. Natalie, can we talk? Leah started to intervene, but I held up a hand. It's okay, I've got this. Ted and I found a quiet corner. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you, hurting our family, until it was too late. I studied his face, seeing the man I'd once loved beneath the anger and bitterness. Ted, I'm sorry, too. Not for leaving, but for not being strong enough to stand up to you sooner. Maybe if I had, things would have been different. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I've lost everything, Natalie. The company's on the verge of bankruptcy. Lisa left months ago, but losing the boys, that's killing me. In that moment, I saw our entire history flash before my eyes. The good times and the bad, the love and the pain. And I made a decision. Ted, I don't want to take the boys away from you. They need their father. But they also need a healthy, stable environment. Can we find a way to co-parent that doesn't involve courts and lawyers? Hope flickered in his eyes. You'd be willing to try? I nodded. For the boys, and for us, not as a couple, but as parents who want the best for their children. When the judge called us back in, we approached her together. Our lawyers looked confused as we explained our desire to work out a co-parenting agreement outside of court. The judge smiled. I'm pleased to see you both putting your children's needs first. I'll grant a continuance to allow you to work out the details. But, she added, her gaze stern, if you can't come to an agreement, I will make a final ruling. As we left the courthouse, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Leah was waiting, her face a mix of concern and curiosity. Are you sure about this? She asked as I explained what had happened. I nodded, watching Ted walk to his car. It won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. For all of us. That evening, as I tucked the boys into bed, Jake looked up at me with serious eyes. Mom, is Dad coming back? I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. No, sweetie, Dad and I aren't getting back together. But we're going to work on being better parents to you and Ethan. You'll still see Dad regularly, and we'll all work on being a family, just in a different way. Jake nodded, seeming to understand. As I kissed him goodnight, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Later, standing on Leah's porch and looking up at the stars, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I'd lost a husband but found myself. I'd faced my greatest fears and come out stronger. And most importantly, I'd created a new kind of family, one built on love, respect, and resilience. As I breathed in the cool night air, I smiled. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I was excited about the future, my future, our future. And it was bright with possibility.